Chapter 601. He thought about the money he had left and felt that Wei Bai was richer than him now. His brother was indeed an ingrate. Wasn't he afraid that his paralyzed brother would starve to death? Wei Bai looked at the time. Good caregivers are very popular. I still have a few good employers to visit. Goodbye. He Dongling immediately said, Yes, yes, yes. I'll give you a higher salary. I'll double your salary. He really needed a good caregiver in his current condition. Wei Bai was the best choice. Wei Bai nodded. Okay then, I'll come back after signing the contract. He Dongling thought, she's so aware of the law. Wei Bai successfully became He Dongling's caregiver. As a divorced rich woman, Wei Bai expressed that she wanted to play around and enjoy life. She didn't want to face He Dongling, an old man who was half paralyzed and twice married. She couldn't go anywhere. The assassin's side mission. So she prepared a bed for He Dongling and stuffed him into his afternoon nap. She opened her laptop and started to look at Enrich on Weibo. Cute little fresh meat was so eye-catching. This was her little baby who was easy to win over, easy to flirt with, and easy to increase her favorability. He Dongling held the book and pretended to read for a while. He realized that Wei Bai didn't care about him at all. He actually had some doubts in his heart. Wei Bai became his caregiver because she still had feelings for him. Otherwise, why would she save him and take care of him? After all, even who Li Jing had left, she must have had unfinished feelings for him if she didn't leave. But these few days, other than the necessary care, she fulfilled her duty as a caregiver. She didn't even talk to him. She was worse than a stranger. He Dongling read the book for a long time, but he couldn't turn the page. He carefully turned his face and glanced at Wei Bai. She sat in a chair, and in front of her was a small desk with a notebook. Her hand carelessly supported her chin, and a few strands of hair fell to the side of her ears. The skin on her cheeks was so tender that water could be pinched out. She didn't need any makeup to see the delicate texture of her skin. Wei Bai suddenly smiled. There was a warm light in her clear eyes. It was indescribably beautiful. Scum He's favorability, 25. When Wei Bai heard this, she didn't show any fluctuations. Compared to He Nanchi's 75, 25 was nothing. He Dongling found that Wei Bai was really ignoring him. He finally couldn't help but put down the book. What are you reading? Wei Bai's smile disappeared, and she looked at him seriously. Nothing. He Dongling had a gentle smile on his face and was somewhat embarrassed. He was thick-skinned and continued, I think it's Nanchi's news. I saw a little. Wei Bai nodded and revealed a happy smile. Yes, Nanchi is promising. The scandals on Weibo are starting to turn around, and his former fans are starting to come back. He Dongling never liked his younger brother to be in the entertainment industry. He could earn some money. He didn't expect that after the He family collapsed, He Nanchi was the most promising one. His expression softened. Can you show me? I haven't seen him in a long time. He didn't know what was wrong with He Nanchi. In the past, he would occasionally think of home and make a few calls. Now he didn't even call. He wasn't worried that his half-paralyzed brother would die in the hospital at all. Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before turning the notebook to him. He Dongling's eyes showed a hint of a smile. Indeed, Wei Bai still had some feelings for him. // Chapter 602. Then, he saw a new post on her Weibo on her laptop. Nancy, you're the best. You're the best. I like you the most. From your #1 fan who loves you. He Dongling. He felt that he had to rub his face to prevent his smile from collapsing. You're Nancy's fan? Wei Bai said without hesitation, Yes, I've liked his songs since a long time ago. He's so handsome that even the heavens can't tolerate it. He Dongling. Wei Bai and Nancy is kind, cute, and talented. When I married you, I thought that since you're Nancy's brother, you must be like him. He Dongling. So I'm a substitute? Wei Bai suddenly sneered and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. In the end, He Dongling. This look of disdain is too obvious. He Dongling felt that he had been hit. He reluctantly showed an indifferent smile. Nanchi, this child is really good. Our relationship is also very good. He often calls me when there's nothing to do. Brother long, brother short. I'm the one who comforts and helps him when he encounters many setbacks. Suddenly, the phone rang. Dongling's first reaction was to look at his phone, but then he realized that the ringtone was not right. Wei Wei Bai picked up the phone and accidentally pressed the speaker button. Hinanchi's voice rang out amidst the noise. Wei Wei, I'm going to record a show. Wei Wei Bai immediately smiled. Come on, Nancy, you can do it. Hinanchi's voice softened. I was a little nervous at first, but when I heard your voice, I felt like I could defeat the whole world. Wei Wei Bai's eyes also softened. Tell me if you have any difficulties. I'll always cheer you on Weibo. Hinanchi said with a smile. I saw it. That #1 fan is you, right? I'm very, very happy to see your message. Wei Wei Bai. That's right. Always remember that I am your #1 fan. No matter what kind of situation you are in, I will never leave you. Hinanchi was silent for a long time before he said, Yes, I will return to that peak for you. And then he hesitated for a moment before changing his words. Then I'll tell everyone that you're the person I'm most grateful to. She was also his favorite person. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 80. Wei Wei Bai's finger trembled, and her favorability rose again. Damn, she felt like she really had to belly dance with the system in this world. She immediately changed the topic. Your brother, Hinanchi, immediately pricked up his ears and became alert. What's wrong with my brother? He won't come to harass you, right? Don't believe him. He's just trying to cheat you of your money. He's a man with hands and feet. He won't starve to death. If you see him, just avoid him. Don't let him stick to you. Dongling. What's the use of having a brother like you? Wei Wei Bai glanced at Dongling, who couldn't hold back his smile. She said gently. When he woke up, his legs were paralyzed. Hinanchi was stunned. Because he was angry with his brother, he didn't pay much attention to his brother's news. After all, since young, his brother was independent and deceiving people. He was strong and didn't need a family, so it had formed a deep impression of him. So he thought that his brother could take care of himself. Hinanchi, I'll go see him when I have time. Although he's very pitiful that he's paralyzed, you don't have to pity him. He still has me. I'll take care of him. / Chapter 603. He was worried that Wei Wei Bai's heart would soften when she saw Dongling paralyzed. He would take care of his brother. She didn't need to. Dongling. Is this his brother? This is his enemy. Wei Wei Bai, it's okay. You can go to work in peace. After that, she said a few more considerate words to let Hinanchi sing in peace and not increase his favorability. After hanging up the phone, she looked at Dongling's half-smile and continued to look at her laptop expressionlessly. Dongling couldn't hold the half-smile on his face. He coughed lightly and said sarcastically, You and Nanchi have such a good relationship. Those who don't know would think that the two of you are a couple. Bai Wei Wei didn't have the slightest trace of emotion. Only people with filthy hearts think dirty. Dirty Dongling. Wei Wei Bai snorted. Little guy, if you want to fight with me, I won't kill you. Dongling suddenly said, I want to drink water. As a nurse, Wei Wei Bai went to pour water. It's too hot. He disliked it. Wei Wei Bai frowned, then lowered her head and blew on it seriously with a focused expression. Dongling didn't say the disdain that was about to come out of his mouth. She passed the cold water to him. Dongling didn't drink things that others blew on, but he didn't know how to reject it. It became, You can feed me. Although Wei Wei Bai was impatient, she still fed him. Dongling took a sip, and his eyes couldn't help but be affectionate. It was like sparkling spring water, clear and gentle. Wei Wei, he started to fire indiscriminately again. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, Extra service, 100 yuan. Dongling, who was as tender as water, was speechless. Wei Wei Bai took out a small notebook and wrote, This is an extra service for the caregiver. Your hand is not disabled, so feeding you water is a special service. You need a tip. Dongling's eyes twitched, and the gentleness in them disappeared. Where was the Wei Wei Bai that made his heart ache when he saw her? Who was this? Wei Wei Bai sneered. In the past, I was young and immature. I thought that as long as I liked someone, I could do anything for him, even if I was covered in scars. She sized him up coldly. Now that you're older, you know how to be childish. So what if she likes me? Money is the most important thing. At least, she won't betray me. His tone was filled with disappointment and deep condemnation. Dongling couldn't use his usual tricks. Even under her disdainful and reproachful gaze, he actually felt a little embarrassed. Wei Wei Bai put down the cup and went back to work. He Dongling pursed his lips. His expression was gloomy, and he couldn't help but cross his fingers. After a long silence, he said, "In the past, I let you down." Wei Wei Bai froze in the middle of tidying up the table, and her back stiffened. He Dongling looked at his legs. He still couldn't bear the fact that he had become a cripple. "I'm a scumbag. I thought you could afford it, so I made a move on you." He looked over from the corner of his eyes. Wei Wei Bai's shoulders seemed to be trembling. He Dongling's heart twitched. It was only natural for him to be a scumbag. But in front of Wei Wei Bai, he suddenly couldn't be so natural. Maybe it was because most of the people who were scumbags in the past were not good people. It was by Wei Wei who really liked him, B.A. He Dongling said lightly, "I'm sorry. Ding, he scumbag's favorability is at 30. When Wei Wei Bai heard the notification, she retracted her miserable expression and turned around indifferently. "If you're really sorry, then give me more of your property." He Dongling. Fast crossing system. Male god, you come here at the /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m Sashu. Combo make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click the Chapter 604. Wei Wei Bai was not touched at all. Her tone was even calmer than his. "I heard that you still have 2 houses." He Dongling's mind was alarmed. She didn't even let go of his last bit of wealth. He immediately, very quickly said, "How can you use money to express an apology? How profane of this heavy and sincere apology." Wei Wei Bai almost rolled her eyes. "Don't chat with me if you don't have money. I won't forgive your apology. That's all." After saying that, she walked away in disdain and didn't even look at him. He Dongling was left alone. He Dongling wondered if he had become ugly and if his eyes were blind. Why did the tricks that had always worked so well in the past not work at all? The Wei Wei Bai he knew was not like this. When did she become so shrewd? He Dongling sighed sorrowfully. "You're no longer the beautiful woman I used to know. You used to be so easy to coax. Why are you so shrewd now?" He Dongling planned to do rehabilitation because his legs were paralyzed. However, rehabilitation was a very painful and long process. Under the guidance of the doctor, he slowly got up but fell back again. Again and again. Even someone as gloomy as he Dongling couldn't take it sometimes. Wei Wei Bai watched silently and came over to help him from time to time. Sometimes, he Dongling would tease her to divert her attention. "Why do you pity me?" Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. That indifferent and calm gaze didn't have a trace of sympathy. He Dongling was so thick-skinned that she felt a little embarrassed. Then Wei Wei Bai revealed a mocking smile. "Do you know what it means to be pitiful?" She dragged him to sit on the chair and said calmly, "Have you seen someone so poor that they have to sell their blood?" He Dongling. Wei Wei Bai. When I was at my poorest, I didn't even have enough blood to sell. I even wanted to sell my kidney. If it weren't for the fact that I went to the bar as an escort, what you would see now would be me missing a kidney. He Dongling. Although I didn't really control you, I didn't force you to this extent." Wei Wei Bai said softly, "Your parents forced me." He Dongling's words were stuck in his throat, and he suddenly didn't dare to say anything. "Wei Wei Bai. I was even beaten up by someone with a cloth bag over my head. I couldn't afford the medical fees. I was worried that you would be sad when you saw me, so I didn't dare to go back. I could only stay in the park for a few days, hoping that the wounds wouldn't be so obvious before I went back." He Dongling's heart sank. Wei Wei Bai laughed self-deprecatingly. "Humiliation, beatings, framing, no job, and no place to eat at your house. To be honest, I'm poor, but the poorest time I was when I was in your house." He Dongling moved his lips, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. Wei Wei Bai's tone was so calm that it was as if she wasn't talking about her. He Dongling, being disabled isn't scary, being poor is. You don't deserve to be pitted at all. At least you can afford to stay in a ward, hire a caregiver, and pay for rehabilitation. People like you don't know what happiness is even if you're used to being rich. Dongling's heart was stabbed by her words again. He felt like he was bleeding this time. He lowered his eyes, and his words were a little sluggish, but they were much more sincere. Wei Wei, I'm sorry. Wei Wei Bai said, I don't forgive you. Dongling's fingers tightened on the wheelchair. I will give you the money. Wei Wei Bai immediately said, How much? I've suffered so much. Giving me 1 million isn't much. Dongling. It's rare for me to be so apologetic, but the feeling is gone again. Chapter 605. Sure enough, talking about money hurt feelings. Wei Wei Bai said again, How about 500,000? Don't play dead when you talk about money. Dongling, who played dead, finally got angry. Money, money, money. Can't you see that I'm sincerely apologizing? Dongling, who had been a bad guy since he was young, felt a strong sense of guilt for the first time. Why wasn't she moved? Wei Wei Bai, get lost if you don't have money. What's the use of apologizing? Why don't you go to heaven? Dongling, I feel like I've been hurt. My heart hurts. Ding. Dushabag's favorability is at 35. System, you attacked him until he started doubting his life, and his favorability increased? Wei Wei Bai, douchebags love to be cheap. If you beg him bitterly, he'll think he's charming. You have to make him doubt his life. You have to let him know that the people he hurt will hurt him in return. Only then will he know what it means to be responsible for his mistakes. Douchebags should beat him up, attack him, and mess with him. Let him feel a little warmth in the cold. Then he'll have favorability. To put it bluntly, you're still cheap. Dongling was angry. He stood up fiercely and wanted to walk away. But his legs were weak, and he fell to the ground. Bai Wei Wei hurriedly bent down to support him. Her petite body supported his heavy body with great effort. She seemed to struggle a little. Dongling pressed half of his body on top of her thin body. He could hear her faint panting. He could feel that her arm was trembling with all her strength. Dongling's heart softened. I still have some stocks. I bought them for more than 1 million. I'll give you 600,000. Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked at him coldly. She didn't say anything. She put him in the wheelchair and looked at the time. It's time for me to get off work. Then she turned and walked away. Dongling was confused. Do you think the money is too little? How about 800,000? Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks and turned around. Her eyes were full of ridicule. Do you really think that money can erase everything? Dongling, the hurt you gave me will be there for the rest of my life. I won't forgive you, no matter how much money you have. With that, she lifted her feet and left. Dongling looked at the departing figure. He wanted to stand up but fell back down. His handsome face was a little twisted. Didn't you say that you'd forgive me if I was given 500,000? Why are you suddenly not asking for money? Why was this woman so difficult to deal with? After Wei Wei Bai walked out, she immediately took a taxi to the TV station. She was now a fan of Inanchi. This was Inanchi's first interview after his comeback, so she had to support him. She had already bought tickets for the event on the internet. Although she couldn't flirt with Inanchi, it was still good to have a look when she had time. At the scene of the interview, Inanchi was wearing a black suit. His thick black short hair was fluffy, his eyes were deep and dark, and his legs were long and straight under his suit pants. He had a tall and slender figure, a natural model's frame. Wearing a black suit, coupled with his youthful feeling between an adult and a teenager, it fused into a kind of handsomeness that made people unable to take their eyes off him. The host had interviewed Inanchi before. Inanchi had become famous at a young age, but at that time, he didn't have such a textured temperament. Now he had gone through hardships, but it was eye-catching. Inanchi sat on the single-seater sofa, and the host was opposite him. The questions were all carefully selected. After Inanchi's comeback, the management company that he signed with had already spoken to everyone. They told him not to push him too far. Moreover, Ninth Master didn't say anything. Everyone gave face to the management company and stopped. At https://www.sasha.com/ to read the full article at https://www.sasha.com/txt download at https://www.sasha.com to read on. Com. Chapter 606. Good comments on the internet, as well as some supportive posts from Inanchi's real fans, could also appear. Those encouraging words from before, as well as the support of those fans, were not only drowned out by the internet water army. Instead, they were deleted and banned by special forces. This was also the reason why Inanchi could not find a single fan on the internet who said good things about him. Nanchi, long time no see. I heard that you suffered some blows previously, but now you've finally recovered. The host said with a friendly smile. Inanchi was calm and elegant. Yes, something happened at home. Now it's settled down. The host said, your fans are also worried about you. Your comeback is the best news for them. Inanchi did not show any sarcasm at all. Instead, he answered maturely and generously. Thank you to them for always supporting me. They are all my motivation for my comeback. Clearly, because of special reasons, he could not see a single supportive fan at all. The two of them had to play their part. The new song this time is really good. Although the album is not out yet, the single has already rushed to the top of the music charts this year. Your fans say that this song has the taste of love. When Inanchi heard this question, his ears hidden under his fluffy short hair could not help but turn red. His voice was still calm. Not yet in love. More than a crush. The host did not expect that the answer was not normal, but a topical one. He immediately asked impatiently, crush? Does Nanchi have a crush on someone? Inanchi was a little nervous. He revealed a smile to hide his tense emotions. He wanted to say no. After all, this was a show. It did not matter if he lied. Moreover, it was too early to reveal his feelings. He did not know if it would scare her. However, he could not help but want to reveal his inner thoughts. I do have a crush. Inanchi laughed. His eyes seemed to be filled with broken stars. She is my biggest motivation for my comeback. I hope that one day, I can tell everyone that I like her. The host looked surprised. It seems that you really like her. In this kind of situation, the words that were said could not be taken back. Many celebrities had someone they liked. When they were photographed, they would never admit it even if there was evidence. Because celebrities still had to rely on their fans to make a living. For celebrities who had someone they liked, their economic benefits would be reduced by more than half. Inanchi actually said that he had a crush on someone at such a crucial moment in his comeback. In fact, it was very disadvantageous to his star path. Inanchi looked at the camera with a smile in his eyes. Yeah, I like her. I like her so much that I don't even know how to confess. The host wanted to ask who it was. However, Inanchi pursed his thin lips and continued to smile politely. His words perfectly avoided the trap. She didn't want to give the veteran host any chance to talk. Compared to the past, he was much more mature. He was also much more handsome. A unique charm of a mature man began to appear on his body. In the end, the host had no choice but to give up. Everyone followed the rules and asked the preset questions. Then the program ended. The ratings for this episode would be very high. Inanchi greeted the host politely for a while and then thanked the staff behind the scenes. The manager's assistant immediately took the snacks that they had just bought and distributed them to the staff. Inanchi also took small bowls of snacks and handed them to the audience. He had a very kind attitude. Chapter 607. He wanted to return to the stage again. He wanted to stand at the top. He wanted his song to be recognized by everyone and get a lot of investment support. He couldn't be as cold and indifferent as before. Inanchi passed a bowl of snacks to a girl in sunglasses in the front row. Her fingers were slender, and her palm lines were light and clean. She was so beautiful that people wanted to touch her. Inanchi placed the small bowl in her hand. Suddenly, his fingers paused. He looked at this hand. It was a familiar feeling. Inanchi didn't dare to look up. The program was recorded and would only be broadcasted next week. He thought that she wouldn't hear it. Even if she did, it would be next week. That was why he dared to say what he thought. But thinking that she had heard it in front of him, it was no different from a confession. Inanchi's fair and handsome face blushed. He nervously pursed his thin lips and almost couldn't retract his hand. He was so nervous that he didn't know what to do. Nanchi, her clear voice gently entered his ears. Inanchi looked up. His face was red and his breathing was irregular. Wei Bai, who was wearing sunglasses, smiled and said, "You have someone you like. Who is it?" Hinanshi didn't know if he was disappointed or relieved that he had escaped a disaster. I'll tell you next time. Wei Wei Bai was puzzled but happy. Then you must bring her to see me. I'll help you check. Our Nanshi is so cute. The girl you like must be the best and cutest. Hinanshi nodded frantically. Then I'll go backstage to change first. Don't go, I'll be back in a while. Because there weren't many people at the front desk, the seats were far away. Some were even staff, so no one could hear their whispered words. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and smiled. Okay. Hinanshi immediately turned and left. When he walked to the dressing room, he saw himself in the mirror. His face was red, and the depth in his eyes was filled with unconcealable joy. There was also a sense of loss and loss. He covered his face with his hands and groaned after a long time. Wait for me. You will soon know who I like. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 80. The system and Wei Wei Bai were speechless. Wei Wei Bai cried out, I don't think I did anything. The favorability points are rising too quickly. The system gave in. I'll go to the mall and see if there's any underwear that can show your butt and cover your front. I'll buy you one then. Wei Wei Bai. Do you need to buy it? Just take a pair of pants and open a big hole in the back to show your butt. The system said, you're the smart one. Wei Wei Bai said, of course. The system and Wei Wei Bai fell silent at the same time. We're not really going to belly dance, are we? Dumbass Su Tong covered his face. He really wanted to chop off the seductive hand. Hinanshi calmed down backstage and returned to the front desk to look for her. Wei Wei Bai had already left. He was in a daze and immediately called Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei, where did you go? Wei Wei Bai said, I'm going to the hospital. Hinanshi's eyelashes fluttered. After a moment of silence, he said, Are you going to see my brother? Wei Wei Bai said calmly, I'll be his nurse and take care of him for a while. Hinanshi's fingers trembled and he almost dropped his phone. That was why she insisted on going to work. Only because her brother needed her to take care of him. He suddenly felt that his eyes were a little sore and his mood began to fall. You still like my brother? Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Address. http://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Address. http://www.sashu.com//transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Address. http://www.sashu.com transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Address. http://m/sashu.com// the save button below to record this reading. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 608. Wei Wei Bai quickly retorted, No, it's just that we were once husband and wife. Seeing how down and out he is, it's only right to help. Hinanshi still felt uneasy. Really? Wei Wei Bai promised, really? Hinanshi didn't believe it, but he couldn't blatantly ask her not to take care of him. Wei Wei Bai said, We're almost there. Goodbye. The phone call ended. Hinanshi remained in the same position for a long time, the grievance in his eyes thickening. He took a deep breath, but he still couldn't suppress the sour feeling in his heart. Then he called the housekeeping center. I want to find more than 5 caregivers. His brother did need someone to take care of him, but why did it have to be Wei Wei Bai? Who knew if their old feelings would rekindle as they took care of each other? He knew his brother best. His brother was the best at flirting with girls. He also liked to lie. He was worried that she would be deceived again. Hinanshi stuffed his phone back into his pocket, then put his fingers into his pockets habitually and lowered his head. He was like an abandoned stray dog. I've already grown up. I'm younger and better looking than my brother. I like you more. If you like mature men, I'll be mature soon. He muttered softly, so wait for me. Wei Wei Bai looked at her phone nervously and waited for a long time. Finally, the favorability didn't increase. Bringing up his scum could indeed stop the favorability from increasing. Whether it was the guilt for his brother or the worry that Wei Wei Bai would like his brother again, Hinanshi would feel conflicted. Once conflicted, the favorability wouldn't increase easily in the future. If they offset each other, the favorability would remain stable and wouldn't increase easily. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was time to get off work, thinking about whether she could get more favorability points, she resigned to fate and went to the hospital to see if Scum was dead. Just as she reached the entrance of the hospital, she saw Scum being pushed out. More than 10 burly men wearing sunglasses and black suits looked like the scene of a triad boss appearing in a Hong Kong film. She was shocked. What was going on? Trash, he actually mingled with the underworld? Wei Wei Bai asked the system. The system flipped through the information. These people are all Elder Jio's people. They're here to find trouble. Hinanchi didn't offend Master Jio, so at most he was implicated. Dongling went against Master Jio directly and woke up in a vegetative state. Master Jio felt that this kind of person needed to be educated, so he sent someone to pick him up. Was this education going to be dissected or filled with cement and sunk into the sea? Actually, she also felt that Jerk did need to be educated. But now that he was dead, was it appropriate to leave her, his ex-widow, to belly dance? Dongling sat in a wheelchair. His face was pale, but his eyes were terrifyingly dark, like a black whirlpool without any light. When he saw Master Jio's men coming, he was actually glad that Wei Wei Bai had left early. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worth it to implicate another person. Dongling couldn't help but rub his fingers together. This was an instinctive action for him to ease his nerves. The extended Rolls-Royce was parked under a Chinese parasol tree not far from the hospital. He looked at the car and slowly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he couldn't think of being kind today. Offending Master Jio was the worst investment he had ever made in his life. Now, it was time to repay the debt of his mistake. Dongling, a familiar voice, clear and soft, but almost pierced his heart. Dongling turned to look. He saw Wei Wei Bai walking over quickly. Because she was in a hurry, her hair was a little messy, and she didn't have time to tie it up. Chapter 609. Her delicate skin had a delicate beauty under the sun. Dongling's heart suddenly lifted. The words that reached his mouth to let her go didn't come out, but he swallowed them back. Because one of the burly men had already walked over. Reminding Wei Wei Bai had become a meaningless action, other than making Sire Jio angrier. So he didn't say anything rationally. He allowed Wei Wei Bai to walk to his side with a blank and vigilant expression. She passed through the burly men. She didn't turn around and run. Instead, she walked to his side. What's wrong? Dongling held the armrest of the chair with his fingers. His thin lips were pursed tightly, and a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes. Nothing. It's just that a creditor is here. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. They had already walked to the back door of the Rolls-Royce. Someone opened the door and pushed Dongling in. Wei Wei Bai was also pushed in. The car was very spacious. It was obvious that it had been modified and reinforced. Even the windows were strengthened versions of bulletproof glass. An old man wearing a colorful shirt, a 3-kilogram gold necklace, black leather shoes, and a cigar in his hand appeared. Dongling's neck was tense, and he almost couldn't lower his head. The white-haired old man had a terrifying aura. His eyes were as cold as a venomous snake as he glanced at Dongling. Little brat, you're lucky. I knocked you into a vegetative state, but you can still wake up. Dongling crossed his fingers. His fingertips were a little white. He smiled. Sire Jio, I've offended you. I hope you can let the He family off on the account that I'm half paralyzed. Sire Jio's fierce-looking face trembled. He laughed coldly. Your ambition and your refined appearance make you look like a wolf in sheep's clothing. You know when to yield and when to stand tall. When a seedling like you grows up, you'll be a Sire Jio in the future. Dongling sat in a wheelchair, but because he was in the car, he was close to Sire Jio. He naturally took the match beside him, lit it up, and lit Sire Jio's cigarette. That's because I was young and immature. Haven't you seen a rash fool before? That's exactly what happened to me. Only after I was badly battered did I realize that there are some things that I can't covet. He was neither servile nor overbearing. Even when he lowered his head, he did it elegantly and calmly. Sire Jio thought highly of him. He took a puff of his cigar and looked coldly at Dongling. Dongling's smile was gentle, but his little rubbing action was still obvious. Jio Yi narrowed his eyes viciously. Although I cherish talents, I can't keep poisonous talents. Dongling, you're very ambitious. Now you're a wolf cub with a broken leg. In the future, you'll be a man-eating beast. Dongling's smile gradually disappeared. He knew. Lord Nine came back this time to take his life. Even if he was paralyzed, although he was irritable, this kind of difficulty was not enough to defeat him. But with Lord Jio's current strength, indeed, he could easily kill him. It was all his fault for being too young and too impatient. That was why he had provoked Ninth Elder, this venomous snake. Ninth Elder took out his gun. You're a young man that I admire very much. Let me personally send you on your way. There was no fear in Dongling's eyes, only unwillingness. He bit his lip and clenched his fists tightly. Was it going to end like this? A mistake caused the He family to collapse and also caused him to lose his life. The price of this mistake was too great. A debt must be repaid with money, and a life for a life. Does Dongling owe a life debt? A clear question rang out in the murderous car. To read the full article at https://www.sashu.com to read on your phone. https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 610. Sire Nine's fingers paused. He turned his head and saw Wei Wei Bai sitting beside the wheelchair. When Bai Wei Wei was pushed in together, both men were aware of it. But in this kind of situation, no one took women seriously. So she had been ignored. If she didn't speak, a trace of nervousness flashed across Dongling's eyes, and his fingers even trembled. Sire Nine's cold eyes looked over and saw that Wei Wei Bai didn't have a trace of fear on her face. There was a stubborn clarity in her almond-shaped eyes, like a flower that had just bloomed, with a sense of vitality. She was so beautiful that she was full of vitality. This was a vitality that an old man in his 60s didn't have. The anger in Sire Nine's eyes faded. He said as if he was teasing a pet, "He only owes money for a piece of land, but I want him to pay it back." Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked up at him disapprovingly. "Then you're in the wrong." This sentence was bold and presumptuous. Even if Sire Nine had a gun in his hand, Wei Wei Bai acted like an ordinary person, turning a blind eye and acting sweet. Dongling suddenly shouted, "Wei Wei Bai, why are you causing trouble? Hurry up and apologize to Sire Nine." His heart was in his mouth. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't been noticed, according to Sire Nine's usual practice, she wouldn't have died. Just like Hinanshi. Because she didn't participate in this matter from the beginning to the end, she was only slandered, causing her to suffer a setback in her career. So she would be fine because she was the same as Hinanshi, an innocent person. Wei Wei Bai looked at Dongling, and a gentle look flashed across her eyes. Dongling was stunned. That gaze, Wei Wei Bai looked at Sire Nine again. Owning a piece of land is a matter of money. A human life is more important than the sky. Dongling didn't kill anyone, so you can't kill him. Jiu Yi suddenly laughed. His laughter was hoarse and terrifying. The muscles on his face trembled. "Little girl, this is not your home. You can say whatever you want." "Wei Wei Bai, what I said is fair and just. Why can't I say it? Who needs a life to repay a debt? Why are you so unreasonable?" Lord Nine's smile froze. "Why are you so unreasonable?" This sentence was so familiar, and it immediately pulled him back to those past years. There was once a girl who disagreed with him and said the same thing to him. Sire Jiu looked at Wei Wei Bai's face. They clearly looked different, but his expression and words were so naive that they were stupid. Yet they were so similar. Lord Jiu's tone softened. "Then how do you think I should deal with this matter? Dongling owes me a lot of money for that piece of land." Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were bright and beautiful. "No matter how many lives there are, we can still earn money. But if people are gone, then there's nothing left." Jiu Ye's eyes trembled. It was too similar. These words were filled with a sense of naivety and recklessness. His eyes were a little moist. The gun in his hand suddenly couldn't be pointed at Wei Wei Bai. Lord Nine had been through a lot, even when facing such a similar girl. When he should be ruthless, he was still ruthless. "But I just want him to pay back his life because I'm unreasonable." With that said, Lord Nine raised his gun and was about to shoot at Dongling. But just as the muzzle of the gun moved in front of Dongling, Wei Wei Bai was already in front of Dongling. She was extremely nervous as she faced the muzzle of the gun. A cold light flashed across Lord Nine's eyes. "Little girl, I remember that you should have divorced he Dongling. You should hate him and not save him. He had investigated the he family's matters clearly. //. Chapter 611. When he Dongling heard this, he also looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai's tense back. She stubbornly held on. Her muscles were trembling in fear. But she refused to move her body. Wasn't she afraid of death? He Dongling admitted that he was afraid of death. He even let out a sigh of relief when she blocked him. But when he saw her thin body blocking him behind her, all kinds of feelings flashed through his heart. But the shock was the most obvious. Even if they were in love, they still broke up just like that. How could she say that she didn't love him and even risk her life for him? Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 35. Wei Wei Bai's forehead was covered in sweat. She was so scared that her face was a little pale, but she still revealed a smile. There's no other way. A day as husband and wife means endless kindness. Just like debts have to be repaid, kindness also needs to be repaid. Jiuyi, kindness? Wei Wei Bai nodded, and her smile became gentle. He is the man I loved. No matter if this relationship is completely unrecognizable or full of holes. To me, when we first met, this love brought me great happiness. Isn't it a kind of kindness for a person to bring you happiness? He Dongling held his breath. His thick and cold heart wall. Her words hit him hard in the head. He didn't have time to distinguish whether it was shame or something else. Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 40. Wei Wei Bai's smile deepened. He doesn't love me, but I loved him. Even if I let it go now, I still hope that the person I love can be happy. Jiu Ye's fierce expression softened. You're really a good child. These words were filled with distant memories. No one knew who he was talking about. Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief. The next moment, Jiu Yi said coldly, "It's a pity that you still have to die. If you like him so much, then let's die together." With that, he pulled a trigger. He Dongling's mind was blank. He pushed Wei Wei Bai hard with both hands, letting her dodge the bullet. He clearly cherished his life the most. He wouldn't even frown if anyone died. Wei Wei Bai was nothing to him. But before his rationality could stop him, his instincts chose to protect Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai fell to the ground, her face almost disfigured. She quickly looked at He Dongling and found that He Dongling's handsome face was pale, but there was no more bloody hole in his body. Wei Wei Bai said, "Tongzi, you made the right bet. There was no bullet in the first shot." The system was very calm. What's the point of gambling? I already said that there was only one bullet in this ugly old man's gun. That bullet wasn't from the first shot. Jiu Yi laughed again. This time, his laughter had a more hearty feeling. Looks like a wolf cub, like he still has a weakness. I thought you would even betray your parents at critical moments. He Dongling's muscles tensed up. He thought he was going to die. His lips trembled slightly, and he forced himself to maintain his dignity. Jiu Yi, you must be joking. I'm not that heartless. Jiu Yi put away his gun. Seeing that you still have some affection in your heart at critical moments and didn't let your wife take the bullet for you, I'll let you go this time. He Dongling didn't feel happy. The humiliation and anger in his heart grew stronger. But he hid the hatred in his eyes and revealed a grateful smile. Thank you for your mercy, Jiu Yi. Jiu Yi was expressionless. Thank your wife. No, it should be your ex. You really have no taste. You gave up a woman who took the bullet for you. He Dongling couldn't help but look at Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 612. He found that she had already stood up and hurriedly walked to his side to push his wheelchair. She smiled and said, "Then we won't disturb you. We'll leave first." He Dongling didn't say anything, so she used all her strength to push him out of the car. Jiu Yi suddenly said, "Little girl, you're called Wei Wei Bai, right?" Wei Wei Bai turned around and revealed a cute smile. "Yes, then what's your name?" Jiu Yi paused and was silent for a few seconds before saying, "I'm called Jiu Yi." Wei Wei Bai. What a strange name then. Goodbye, Jiu Yi. Jiu Ye's wrinkled face trembled, but in the end, he didn't say anything inappropriate. When Wei Wei Bai got out of the car, he couldn't see her back anymore. Jiu Yi slowly took out a photo from his chest. The photo was yellow, and there was a cute girl with an innocent smile on it. What's your name? Juyi. Why do you have such a strange name? Other people call me that. I'm used to it. Then who are you looking for? I've never seen you before. I'm your father. The tears in Jiu-Ye's eyes fell on the photo, and he quickly wiped them with his sleeve. Darling, Daddy saw a girl who looks like you today. You're both as innocent and as reckless. He wiped the corners of his eyes again. I miss you. After Wei Bai got out of the car, her legs were about to turn to jelly. The triads were so scary. She hurriedly pushed He Dongling as if she was running for her life, taking large strides forward with all her might. When He Dongling confronted Jiu-Yi just now, Wei Bai was already desperately looking at Jiu-Ye's information that the system gave her. Then, in those short few minutes, she finished reading Jiu-Ye's magnificent life. Then, she found the person that Jiu-Yi cared about the most, his daughter, a cute and silly little princess. She immediately imitated it, and it worked. She cried to the system, "Can I complain to the main system that I'm poor and see if there's a system poverty guarantee? See if I can save some money to repair the rejection button of the side mission." If this continued, she wouldn't die on the main mission. Sooner or later, he would be killed by the side quests. The system said the poverty subsistence allowance is the destruction of the poor system. Poverty should not exist in this world. This is the main system's concept. By Wei, this main system is too deranged, BA. So, what if he was poor? Did he eat your life points? The system said, don't worry, you can do it. Just watch Silly White Sweet act, and you'll be out of trouble. When Wei Bai heard this, she didn't even have the mood to show off. She sighed and said, it's the easiest role to play. There's no sense of achievement at all. His motherly yet seductive sister-in-law, his energetic and energetic ex-wife, his silly and sweet little princess who spoke without thinking. The host actually didn't differentiate between the two. The system expressed that the acting skills of a movie queen were indeed frightening. He Dongling suddenly said, Wei. Wei stopped in her tracks and looked at him in confusion. He Dongling clenched and loosened his fingers. His face was completely pale, and his eyes were filled with a sharp sense of ruthlessness. Why did you say that? Why did you take the bullet for me? Don't you know you'll die? Wei Bai was silent. Her spirited eyebrows suddenly drooped. She was unspeakably pitiful. He Dongling didn't let her go. His heart was in a mess, and he couldn't even sort out his own emotions. His back was covered in cold sweat. If he had taken a wrong step, he would have died. But in the face of death, he was still able to maintain his rationality despite being frightened and nervous. But her appearance completely messed him up. Chapter 613. He Dongling's tone became fierce. Haven't you seen my true colors? I'm just playing with you. Do you still love me? When he questioned the sentence, he was actually indescribably nervous. Wei Bai's lips moved, but she didn't make a sound. He Dongling frowned, his eyes filled with deep and chaotic irritation. He turned around and was about to continue questioning, but he saw that Wei Bai's face was full of tears. She bit her lips and didn't cry out loud. Tears flowed out drop by drop. The tip of her nose was red, crying pitifully and cutely. He Dongling's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say a single word. The tears of surviving a disaster were filled with relief, but not happiness. He Dongling realized that he had gone overboard. She risked her life to save him, but he cared about himself and was busy questioning her. He Dongling admitted that he was a scumbag, but to be honest, this was the first time he was such a scumbag to a weak woman from beginning to end. He gritted his teeth and said something that he would never say normally. I will become stronger. Master Jiu will definitely not be able to do anything to me, let alone touch you, so don't cry. He wanted to save face, and his thoughts were deep. Such bold words. If he didn't succeed, it would be very difficult to say it out loud. But when he saw her tears of fear, he couldn't care less. Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 50. Wei Bai sobbed and said, Then when will you become stronger? He Dongling's expression froze. It should be soon. Wei Bai. That means it won't be long. 10 years will be very soon. He Dongling. Wei Bai. That's why I risked my life to save you. and came back after work to serve you. There's no problem with the extra fee, right? He dongling. Wei Wei Bai had already retracted her tears and was seriously checking the numbers. Look, it costs at least 10,000 to block a bullet. I won't ask for much overtime, just 500 yuan. As for the mental damage, just a few thousand will do. Also, when you pushed me just now, I fell and was in so much pain. Just a few thousand will do. He dongling supported his forehead with his hand. His head hurt. Who am I? Where am I? Where did my beautiful ex-wife, who only wanted true love and didn't want money, go? How I missed the idiot from before. She only remembered to ask for money when he was poor. Why didn't she sympathize with a paralyzed old man like him? It wasn't easy for him to earn money. After he dongling returned to the hospital and transferred the money to Wei Wei Bai, he was suddenly enlightened. His legs had to be rehabilitated, and he had to continue earning money. They had to fight for their rights at all costs. The experience of death did not scare him out of his wits. Instead, it aroused the ruthless and savage desire in his heart. Only those who were above others could control their own lives. He would not allow anyone to point a gun at his head a second time. He fell to the ground again. He dongling was sweating profusely. Wei Wei Bai came over to help him. He dongling watched as she struggled to help him to a chair. Then, she took out a clean towel, wiped his sweat, and poured him a glass of water. He dongling did not resist at all. Instead, he obediently allowed her to do as she pleased. Sometimes, when he looked at her, there would be a hint of undetectable gentleness in his eyes. It was a flash of light. It was not much, but it was very precious. No caregiver was so considerate. There wouldn't be any caregiver who would work overtime after work either. And no caregiver would dare to take a bullet for him. So, she still liked him. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 614. He dongling smiled proudly and took a sip of water. Ding, he douchebag's favorability is at 55. Wei Wei Bai was surprised. How did the favorability increase? She didn't seem to have done anything. The system said, it's good that it increased. Who cares how it increased? Wei Wei Bai felt that the system was right. As long as it wasn't dancing, it was fine to do anything. He dongling finished showering and was pushed out of the bathroom by the male nurse. Wei Wei Bai's job as a caregiver was to take care of the daily life. She didn't do it, but specially hired a male caregiver from the hospital to do it. He dongling remembered that when they were husband and wife, he was never willing to touch her. So it was natural that she would be shy. He couldn't bear to force her on this. Wei Wei Bai had just liked Hinanchi's Weibo when she turned around and saw Hinanchi coming out. She gave him the medicine and water. After he dongling took the medicine, he looked up and stared at her seriously. His eyes were heavy, with a dark light, and a trace of undetectable tenderness. He said in a low voice, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about Hinanchi's award on Weibo, so she nodded casually. He dongling hesitated. Today is the Mid-Autumn Festival. Wei Wei Bai's eyes drifted to the notebook. Oh, the Mid-Autumn Festival. No wonder there was a lottery on Weibo, and the prize for the 10th place was Doraemon's 2-meter doll. She wanted it. He dongling saw that she was being perfunctory, and his face turned ugly. The words that were about to come out of his mouth also stopped. He was a douchebag, but he cared about his reputation. Wei Wei Bai, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then I'll go online and repost on Weibo. He dongling suddenly said unhappily, Nanchi's Weibo? Wei Wei Bai nodded. The prize is very good. I'll try to draw a prize. After that, Wei Wei Bai opened Weibo and logged in. He dongling's mouth twitched. He couldn't help but take out his phone and open his cheap brother's Weibo. It was obvious that the comments on Weibo were being controlled. All the negative comments had been deleted, leaving behind a bunch of die-hard fans and a few moderators who were praising Hinanchi's beauty. He dongling glanced at the prize. It was dazzling. He couldn't help but ask, which prize do you want? Wei Wei Bai answered casually, Doraemon. He dongling, how childish. He coughed lightly. I'll buy it for you. Wei Wei Bai didn't even turn her head back. If you buy it, it won't be as exciting as the lucky draw. He dongling who was rejected. He was silent for a few seconds and decided not to lose face. He continued to invite her. You did a good job as a caregiver. I'll give you a prize. Wei Wei Bai turned around. What prize? He dongling. Push me out. Wei Wei Bai didn't think much of it and pushed him out. He dongling smiled. He was indescribably satisfied and happy. Wei Wei Bai pushed he dongling into the jewelry store. Then he took out a ring box. Wei Wei Bai glanced at it and thought that he was going to do something. For example, propose or something. She could also reject him in passing. But he dongling put the ring box in his pocket and had no intention of giving it to her. Wei Wei Bai didn't think much of it and followed he dongling to the gift shop. He dongling bought her a 2-meter blue fatty. Do you like this gift? Wei Wei Bai looked at the blue fatty and suddenly lost interest in the lottery. Because this 2-meter doll was the prize she was going to draw. Chapter 615. She carried the 2-meter tall fatty blue back. He dongling controlled the smart wheelchair and followed behind slowly. When they arrived at the hospital, they saw the entrance of the hospital from afar. There was a conspicuous figure standing there. He was tall and thin. He was wearing a black silk coat with loose sleeves and a soft hood on his head. He was carrying the 2-meter tall fatty blue. A black mask covered his face, revealing only a pair of beautiful eyes and some fair skin. It was Inanshi. Wei Wei Bai was about to greet him. Inanshi had already reacted. When he was waiting in boredom, his eyebrows were drooping. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, his eyes lit up. Even his eyes were shining. Then Inanshi saw that she was holding a doryman in her hands. It was exactly the same as the one in his hands. Then he finally saw his brother appear behind Wei Wei Bai. Inanshi's eyes dimmed. Could it be that Wei Wei Bai still liked his brother? He hesitated for a moment but still walked over. He walked faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, he walked in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei, happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Today is a day to reunite with family. I immediately thought of being with you. Wei Wei Bai revealed a big smile. I bought some fruits and snacks. Let's admire the moon on the rooftop later. Hinanshi's dim eyes were instantly dyed with light. He nodded. Okay. He dongling, who was ignored behind, was speechless. Wasn't he Nanshi's brother? Wasn't he Wei Wei Bai's ex-husband? In terms of family, these two people's family should be him. He dongling deliberately cleared his throat. In the end, the two young people who were carrying the fatty blue were chatting enthusiastically. They completely forgot about the old man sitting in the wheelchair behind them. The old man deliberately coughed again. No one heard it. He coughed repeatedly. Wei Wei Bai turned around. What's wrong with you? Do you need some water? He dongling immediately nodded. 1 cup for 100 will do. There was a water feeding service for 100 yuan worth of water. Back in the ward, Hinanshi put the blue fatty where Wei Wei Bai was sitting. Then, without batting an eyelid, he kicked the blue fatty that his brother had given him aside. He dongling saw it with his sharp eyes, and his eyebrows twitched. Wei Wei Bai brought some water and was about to bend down to feed him. Hinanshi rushed over and took the cup from Wei Wei Bai's hands. I'll do it. Brother, I'll take care of you. He dongling's eyebrows were not only twitching, but the corners of his mouth were also trembling. I thought you had forgotten that I was your brother. You only remembered to see me when your brother was paralyzed. Hinanshi pursed his lips and lowered his eyes. Brother, I'm sorry. I'm too busy. Such a big thing happened at home. I need to carry this family like a man. He dongling's eyebrows relaxed. That was true. His family was in such a mess. This youngest brother of his had not suffered much since he was young. Even when he grew up, he was well-behaved like a good child who did not dare to do anything bad. He thought that Inanshi would not be able to recover from the setback when his family was in such a state. Unexpectedly, the result was somewhat similar to him. He could actually start afresh, show his ambition and talent, and climb up little by little. He dongling was about to forgive him. But then he heard him say, the burden of the family is heavy. You can't do it, and you can't earn much money. You're old, and your major is not outstanding. I thought that you could go out and set up a street stall when you woke up and go to the construction site to carry some bricks to support the family, but you're paralyzed. I can only bear the heavy burden of a family and raise a pair of pitiful old parents, a poor brother who is paralyzed and useless. Poor useless brother. Download the mobile article at https://m sashu. COMT. Chapter 616. He Dongling felt that his entire face was twitching. He moved his lips. This is disdain. This was a blatant display of disdain. He could only go out to carry bricks and set up a stall. He even had a paralyzed older brother who was useless. Who is this? Is he so pitiful in other people's eyes? Wei Wei Bai's voice was full of pity. Nanshi, you've worked hard. Nanchi's hair drooped. He lowered his eyelashes and said obediently, it's not hard. To support my sister, I have to support a half-paralyzed older brother who is useless. He's definitely not suitable to get married again. I'll work hard to earn a lot of money. Wei Wei Bai's expression softened. You don't mind that your brother is paralyzed. Nanchi said, although he's useless and disabled, he's still my brother. He Dongling, who had no sense of presence at the side, had a curse word that he didn't know if he should say. Nanchi suddenly smiled gently at his brother. Brother, drink some water. Otherwise, Wei Wei will be worried again. Dongling's eyes were about to shoot cold arrows. He snorted and drank the water. After drinking the water, Nanchi put down the cup and spread his hands. Pay up, 100 yuan. Dongling. Nanchi said, I heard Wei Wei say that this is an extra service and you have to pay for it. You don't even have 100 yuan? You can owe it first. Dongling. He felt that he wasn't half paralyzed, but had a heart attack. He was going to die from anger. Wei Wei Bai was afraid that Nanchi would anger Dongling to death. She had to mediate. It's the Mid-Autumn Festival. It's a good time for you brothers to get together. Let's go and admire the moon. Nanchi said gently to his brother, Brother, are you tired? Your legs are inconvenient and your body is weak. You should rest early. Dongling also smiled, even more gently than him. You're really considerate of me, but I'm in good health. I just have 2 useless legs. Anyway, I have a lot of money and I'm a noble person. I don't need to walk at all, so it doesn't matter. You're the one who needs to take care of your body. I've heard that there are a lot of actors who suddenly die on the stage. Nanchi, who are you calling a small-time actress? The 2 brothers chuckled as they looked at each other. Then, they turned their faces away at the same time, revealing expressions of disdain. Wei Wei Bai completely ignored them. As long as one of the favorability didn't increase or decrease, the other didn't. She was as calm as the wind. When they were admiring the full moon, the 3 of them occupied the rooftop of the hospital. A picnic cloth was laid out with snacks, fruits, and a box of mooncakes. The moon was big and round, making the 3 people's faces pale. Bai Wei Wei sent Nanchi to run errands to get the lights. Otherwise, the moonlight effect would be too horrifying. Nanchi left in a hurry and came back in a hurry. He was so fast that he didn't give Dongling any time to interact with Wei Wei Bai. Dongling wanted to say to Wei Wei Bai, but he swallowed the happy Mid-Autumn Festival that he was about to say. Nanchi passed the cut fruit to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei, this is delicious. Eat some. Wei Wei Bai looked at the moon and took it. You eat too. Nanchi smiled, his eyes full of happiness. Dongling pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He couldn't ask for food himself, right? That would be too degrading. Nanchi gave Bai Wei Wei a paper towel, as well as the delicious snacks he ate. He gave more than half of them to Bai Wei Wei. Dongling watched from the side, but he didn't get a share. Nanchi suddenly thought of his cheap brother and handed him a mooncake. Eat some, brother. // save button below to record this reading record. Chapter 617. Dongling finally relaxed. He finally remembered his brother. He stuffed all the delicious food to his sister-in-law. If it wasn't for the fact that he thought it was impossible, he would have thought that Nanchi, this blockhead, had been enlightened and liked Wei Wei Bai. Nanchi was still a good child after all. It was probably because he knew about the terrible things he had done and Wei Wei Bai's pitiful past. That was why he was acting like this. Dongling picked up the mooncake and was about to eat it when he realized that something was wrong. He took it out of his mouth again. At first glance, it was the 5-kernel mooncake he hated the filling the most. Wei Wei Bai looked at the moon and realized that the moon in this world was not much bigger than the moon in her reality. So she yawned and wanted to go back to sleep. However, Nanchi suddenly came over. Sleepy? I'll lend you my shoulder. We'll go down later. Wei Wei Bai nodded. After all, There were still a lot of snacks and fruits. It wouldn't be a waste to let Hinanchi eat them. She gently tilted her head and rested it on Hinanchi's shoulder. The strong shoulder looked very thin, but it was very thick as a pillow. Hinanchi was aware that her head, with a slight force, rested on his shoulder. Long strands of hair fell over his shoulder. The fragrance of the hair was more intoxicating than the moonlight. Hinanchi was so nervous that his ears turned red. His hand holding the fruit couldn't stop trembling. He was worried that Wei Bai would see that something was wrong, so he didn't dare to not move. Wei Bai's breathing slowed down. Light and average. Hinanchi reluctantly glanced sideways at her and saw her small and straight nose, as well as her bright red and beautiful lips under the moonlight. It was like a stunning beauty. In Hinanchi's beautiful pupils, only her face was reflected in them. He couldn't help but smile. How nice. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 85. The system silently glanced at the shop. Was the underwear that showed her, but still there? Let's take advantage of the discount and buy two. He Dongling, who was sitting in a wheelchair, looked up and saw their figures leaning against each other. One was petite while the other was tall and slender. Under the moonlight, they were a perfect match. He Dongling's eyelids twitched as a trace of doubt flashed through his dark eyes. He pursed his lips and glanced at them again. In this atmosphere, there was always a sour smell in the air. He Dongling looked at them as he took a big bite of the mooncake. Disgusting, disgusting. Hinanchi felt that the temperature was a little cold. Just as he was about to reach out to carry Wei Bai and go downstairs, he heard a cold voice. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind. Nanchi, Wei is a good girl. Hinanchi's fingers froze. He lowered his eyes, knowing that his brother was testing him. But in the end, his expression softened and he replied, "Yes, she's very good." In the midst of adversity, deep in the swamp, in a place that was even darker than where he was standing, there was light, pulling him out of hell. In this world, there was no better girl than her. He Dongling heard him reply without hesitation, and his heart tightened. Then he said, "I want to marry her again." Hinanchi, he Dongling said, "So she's still your sister-in-law?" Hinanchi suddenly asked, "Did she agree?" He Dongling was stumped for a moment before he said, "Almost." Hinanchi let out a sigh of relief, but she didn't agree. "I know, brother." There was no intense emotion, nor was there a rush to show anything. Hinanchi said this very calmly. He Dongling's test hit cotton, soft and uncomfortable. Hinanchi carefully reached out and carried Wei Bai. // Chapter 618. Wei Bai was tired, so she slept soundly. She leaned softly in Hinanchi's arms, defenseless. Hinanchi said, "Brother, I'll take Wei down first. It's cold here. I'm afraid she'll catch a cold." He Dongling nodded. "Go ahead." Hinanchi nodded and strode away. He Dongling was left in the same spot for a while. Wait, no one was pushing him down the stairs. How was he going to go down? Back in the ward, Hinanchi put by Wei in the place where relatives were accompanying the bed. The two blue fatties were placed quietly in the corner. Hinanchi looked at the one given by his brother and wanted to stuff it into the rubbish bin. But the rubbish bin was not big enough to stuff it in. He specially organized a lucky draw. She had once said that she liked cartoons, especially Doraemon. Therefore, he specially picked out a blue fatty with a cute smile for her. But he was afraid that it would be too obvious, so he put it on Weibo's lucky draw. The blue fatty was not expensive, but as the first prize, it was too special. Plus, the first prize was not easy to draw, so he specially asked his assistant to buy an Apple laptop as the first prize. The first 9 prizes were very expensive. Only the 10th prize was not eye-catching and expensive. What was expensive was only his feelings. But she did not draw, so he had to carry the blue fatty to find her. Hinanchi covered Wei Bai with a blanket. When she was asleep, she was so quiet. Her weak and pure appearance was like the water he was holding, soft and unrestrained, but clear and attractive. Hinanchi was a little nervous. His breathing quickened and his face was a little red. She suddenly whispered something softly. He hurriedly tried to listen, but it was just a meaningless sleep talk. She suddenly turned around and brushed her lips past his ear. Her warm breath tickled his ear, tickling his heart. Hinanchi's brain could not work, and his body was as tense as a rock. With great difficulty, he finally regained his breath. Hinanchi's eyes were burning, but he was suppressing it. When he saw her fingers poking out from under the blanket, he couldn't help but hold them, wanting to put them back so that she wouldn't catch a cold. After holding her hand, he couldn't help but pinch her soft, boneless fingers. After he was done, he couldn't help but measure the ring finger with his finger. This is where the ring is. Hinanchi measured her. After knowing her approximate size, he couldn't help but say, "You're a little thin. I'll fatten you up in the future." He looked up and saw that she was still sleeping soundly. Hinanchi pursed his lips. In the end, he couldn't resist the desire in his heart. He bent down and slowly lowered his head, sucking on her lips. Her lips were soft and plump, just like a flower full of honey. It made him want more. After a deep kiss, Hinanchi raised his head with a red face and neck, but felt a chill on his back. He turned around. The door was open. Dongling didn't know how long he had been sitting at the door. The two men looked at each other, and the atmosphere was suffocating. After a while, Dongling took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. After lighting it casually, he looked through the smoke. He smiled coldly. "Yo, Nanchi has really grown up. You even have a sister-in-law." Hinanchi was silent for a while before correcting him. "Ex-sister-in-law." Dongling almost broke the cigarette in his hand. "Ex-sister-in-law is also your sister-in-law. You haven't even grown hair yet. How can you let your brother down?" Hinanchi immediately replied in a low voice. "You let her down first." Dongling was speechless. "I let her down, so you're going to let me down? Is this the same thing?" Chapter 619. Dongling finally thought of a rebuttal. In the end, Hinanchi said faintly, "I want to marry her. Husband and wife are one. If I let you down, then she let you down. You let her down, so we're even. The system that was eating supper when it was hungry, this bandit logic, full marks." Dongling kept shaking the cigarette in his hand, the smoke forming an S shape. He took a few deep breaths before waving his hand to signal Hinanchi to come out. After all, this was a matter between men. So the two brothers had a tacit understanding not to disturb Weiwei Bai's sleep. When they reached the corridor, Dongling signaled Hinanchi to lower his head. Hinanchi calmly obeyed and punched him in the face. Hinanchi took a few steps back. This punch made his gums bleed. He spat out a mouthful of blood and wiped his mouth with his sleeve expressionlessly. Dongling hit him, and the back of his hand was numb. "So, you're not going to give up?" Hinanchi tilted his head. His complexion was fair and clear. His delicate features usually looked a little too feminine, but he suddenly revealed a cold smile. The sharpness and viciousness in his eyes made the soft parts of his face disappear, leaving only unyielding coldness. "Brother, you don't want her, but I want her." Dongling took a puff of his cigarette irritably. "I'm going back on my word. She's very good." He had played with countless women, but who could be like Weiwei Bai? For him, she endured so many hardships and wasn't afraid. When the He family collapsed, she didn't run. When he was paralyzed, although her face was cold, she still stayed by his side. Dongling wasn't stupid. In fact, he was a cold and calculating businessman. He never knew that he had made the most successful business deal. Unexpectedly, he accidentally married Weiwei Bai because of his playfulness. But the biggest failure of business was that he had actually given up on her just like that. Dongling could not bear to give up on Weiwei Bai. There would not be a second one in the future. Hinanchi's eyes darkened. He suddenly raised his head and revealed his delicate chin. He said expressionlessly, "There's no one in this world who can be taken back just because you say so. I'm young and have a bright future. I like her to death. What can you give her?" Dongling pursed his thin lips and narrowed his eyes, which were full of ruthlessness. Hinanchi was not afraid at all. He carelessly rubbed the corner of his lips with his finger. A punch in exchange for a kiss, he felt that it was too worth it. "I know you, brother. At most, you like her a little. You feel that Weiwei is good to you and won't abandon you when you're in danger. If you get her, you'll get more love." Dongling gritted his teeth. "Hinanchi, shut up." Hinanchi's beautiful eyes drooped down, filled with an unyielding feeling. "I don't understand. What right do you have to treat her like this? You feel that she's good, and you're going back on your words, and not letting her go. Is this what you call liking her? You're just a selfish bastard. Hinanchi said fiercely, I won't let her be sad. I'll do my best to give her happiness. It doesn't matter if she doesn't love me or like me because I'll give her everything I have, including love. If I'm in dire straits and she abandons me, I'll be glad that I don't implicate her. Even if I'm crippled and she doesn't want me, I'll be happy. She doesn't have to take care of me and can get more happiness. These words were said fiercely and anxiously. They were filled with a wolf's nature. Hinanchi walked a few steps in front of Idongling and reached out to grab his collar. He laughed coldly. Can you do it, brother? You can't. You're already in dire straits, and you still want to use her to take care of you. What you want is a nanny and a servant. You'll be able to see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 620. Having said that, Hinanchi gave him a hard push. Idongling hit the back of the wheelchair, and the cigarette in his hand fell to the ground. Hinanchi neatly adjusted his sleeves and said calmly, Brother, if you really love her, I'll compete with you fairly. But you're just saying that she's easy to coax, easy to use, and too kind to take care of your feelings. Save it. When he said this, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a cold smile. In the past, she was bullied because I wasn't around. Now, I'll kick anyone who bullies her in the head. Idongling coughed. Being pushed by him wasn't light. Nanshi, I'll say it again. She's your sister-in-law. Hinanchi looked up. Bright tenderness and fierce dominance intertwined in his eyes. Not to mention my sister-in-law, even if she's my ancestor. I'll take her back and worship her myself. Idongling was like a bird. Weiwei Bai had suffered so much. He was not blind. He had been suppressing his anger for a long time. Idongling smiled, but the corners of his mouth moved reluctantly. Are you determined to steal my woman? But you forgot that the person she likes is still me. Hinanchi's expression turned cold. Idongling said, She's even willing to die for me. What right do you have to snatch her from me? Hinanchi finally couldn't help but roll his eyes in disdain. I love her so much that I'd rather die myself. You can even say such a bastard thing like asking her to die for you. You're so arrogant, aren't you? Idongling repeated, Anyway, she likes me. Hinanchi said, You're in the past. Useless, half-paralyzed, bastard old man. Idongling felt that he didn't die in the car accident, but he was going to die in the hands of his younger brother. Hinanchi turned to leave and said disdainfully, I'm going to see if Weiwei kicked off the blanket. It's a waste of time talking to you. Idongling. Fuck, you're not in the right to covet your sister-in-law, are you? Hinanchi came to the ward and saw that Weiwei Bai was still sleeping in the same position. It was just that his calf had kicked open a corner of the blanket, revealing his bright skin. Hinanchi's mood also fluctuated at the sight of her fair skin. He gently covered her with the blanket. Suddenly, he pursed his lips and couldn't suppress the grievance in his eyes. He didn't have the slightest bit of momentum from before. Do you really like my brother? I like it that much. Hinanchi's eyes were a little wet. He glanced at her beautiful side profile. Can't you like me a little more? I'm much better than my brother. After he finished speaking, he gently picked up her hand and placed it beside his face, looking at her eagerly. If you like mature old men, I'll be very mature in the future. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 90. In the corridor, Idongling lit another cigarette, but he didn't smoke. He just stared blankly. He thought back a lot. He found out that he was possessive of Weiwei Bai, and that he liked her even more. It was indeed not as pure as Hinanchi. She even couldn't raise her head after being insulted by him just now. Idongling started to suspect that maybe he was really too bad to her. Ding, Slag's favorability is at 60. When Weiwei Bai woke up, she found that Hinanchi's favorability was at 90, and Slag's favorability was only at 60. Bai Weiwei was deeply melancholy. She was too lazy to ask why the two men's favorability had risen overnight. Tongzi, get ready. The system. I've already prepared. I've already bought 2 pairs of panties that show off your butt. We'll each have one. Weiwei Bai, you wastrel, do you even need to buy these things? But then again, let's go belly dance together. Chapter 621. 90 and 60. In addition, it was so difficult to get he jerk's favorability. Wei Wei Bai felt that her side mission was going to fail. However, after 90, if there wasn't a major impact, the favorability wouldn't rise so quickly. Probably. Hinanchi's favorability kept rising randomly. Wei Wei Bai felt that she was about to lose hope. "You're awake?" Dongling's voice suddenly sounded. Wei Wei Bai looked up. Her hair was a little messy, and her eyes were a little confused. She saw he jerk wearing a suit and combed his hair. He looked as imposing as sitting in a wheelchair, as if he was sitting in a president's chair. Wei Wei Bai's mouth was about to fall. Dongling was holding some folders in his hand. He flipped through them casually and signed with a fountain pen. "Go wash up and follow me." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before nodding. She looked at the time just now. It was already time for the nurse to work. After Wei Wei Bai finished washing up, she came out and saw the side dishes and minced meat porridge on the table. Dongling lowered his head to work and pointed at the table with his fountain pen. "Finish your breakfast before you start working." "I've already eaten." Wei Wei Bai didn't stand on ceremony. She sat at the table and ate breakfast seriously. Anyway, she even had the heart to belly dance. She was basically fearless. There were 2 targets to be conquered in this plane at the same time. Hinanchi was better, but Dongling was a wily old fox. She couldn't trick him easily. As a result, Wei Wei Bai was also tired. So in front of Dongling, sometimes she couldn't even smile. After breakfast, Dongling said, "Push me out." Wei Wei Bai pushed him out. She found that there was a car waiting outside. Dongling went to the company. The He family had collapsed, and the company was also very depressed. Although they were heavily in debt, they hadn't declared bankruptcy yet. The shell company was leased. The time was not up yet, so he did not take it back. Dongling arrived at the company. More than 10 company members had already arrived. Dongling explained calmly, "They're all old people who are still willing to stay and fight with me after the He family fell. Wei Wei Bai, you're very lucky. After all, this kind of thing had happened, and it was a life-threatening situation. There were still people who were willing to risk their lives to follow Dongling. This was indeed not easy." Dongling smiled. "Yes, I'm very lucky. It's also because I'm a decent person. Wei Wei Bai, I don't know how to be a good person, but I'm pretty good at being a jerk." Dongling entered the company and started the meeting. How to reorganize the company, how to repay the debts, how to make the right promises to get new loans. When Dongling started to work, his face was serious. Although he was in a wheelchair, it did not affect his calm and elite temperament. A beast in human clothing, a cultured scum. It was indeed the best word to describe Dongling. This kind of man who looked decent when he worked. It was indeed easy to flirt with women. Unfortunately, Wei Wei Bai was used to seeing this. In addition, she also did this in reality. So she was completely unaffected by this scene. After a day of work, Dongling suddenly pushed his wheelchair to the floor-to-ceiling glass window. The afterglow of the setting sun fell on him. He turned around, his eyes hazy. His voice was also calm and indifferent. "Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai was curled up on the sofa. She was bored and playing games. She looked up absent-mindedly. Her eyes were almost blinded by the light on his body. Then she heard Dongling say, "Are you willing to love me again?" The system immediately said, "Love, love, love, rise, rise, rise." The first sentence was for Wei Wei Bai to say love, and the second sentence was for Dongling to increase the favorability after saying I love you. Wei Wei Bai felt that the system was a big fool. //T. Chapter 6:22. Her heart was as calm as water, but there was a shocked expression on her face. Dongling's smile deepened, and his voice became mellow. "Wei Wei Bai, I was wrong in the past. From now on, I will pick myself up and make the company work again. I did a lot of wrong things in the past. I won't do it again. So, can you forgive me and come back to my side again?" Hinanchi made him feel a huge sense of crisis. So Wei Wei Bai was also wanted by someone. He had to quickly tighten his grip and hold on to her. Wei Wei Bai was holding her phone. Her fingers were still distracted playing the game. But her eyes were filled with tears, and her tone was still stubborn. "I don't love you, Dongling." Dongling's eyes softened. "I know, it's enough that I love you." System. Shameless. Isn't this stealing the male lead's lines? Wei Wei Bai looked at the unmoving 60 favorability and despised he dongling in her heart. But she still acted. She stared blankly at her phone, and then, as if she had just reacted, she lightly glanced at he dongling. This glance contained all kinds of complicated emotions. In the end, she sighed, "I'm tired, he dongling. It's too tiring to love back and forth. I just want to live well." These words were filled with endless sorrow. It made people feel sad and uncomfortable when they heard it. No matter how hard he dongling's heart was, in front of Wei Wei, by who could take a bullet for him, his heart softened. "I will try my best to make you trust me. I only ask that you give me a chance." Ding, he slag's favorability is at 65. Originally, he just wanted to make her turn back. But he didn't know when. But he dongling felt that his oath of eternal love was about to become true. Living with a woman, he almost didn't dare to imagine it in the past. But now, looking at Wei Wei Bai, he found that so many women couldn't even compare to half of her temperament. He thought it would be good to settle down. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and did not look at him. Her back was indescribably lonely. "Let me think about it. I'm in a mess right now." He dongling didn't have time to say a lot of sweet nothings before they were stuck in his mouth. He was silent for a moment. All right, consider it carefully. At least she still had feelings for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so hesitant. Wei Wei Bai stared at her phone and complained to the system. "What should I do? I'm not fast enough. I'm going to die this round." She looked at the host who had given up on herself and was already planning to belly dance. She didn't even want to conquer scum, and only wanted to play the game. The system indicated that it should first twist its waist and learn how to dance so that it wouldn't look bad when the time came. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, 65 favorable impression points. Maybe we can still struggle a little. Wei Wei Bai, maybe I should open a big one. The system asked, "Big what?" Is the host starting to get serious? Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 92. Wei Wei Bai and the system trembled at the same time. Why did Inanchi's favorability increase again? Wei Wei Bai scrolled through Weibo and found that Inanchi posted a picture on Weibo. The picture was of a soft and white woman's hand and a slender man's hand. Their fingers were intertwined. Wei Wei Bai saw that it was her hand at a glance. There was a sentence attached to the picture. "I'll accompany you for the rest of your life." What a rustic literary style. This pretentiousness made Wei Wei Bai's teeth ache. A rustic love line moved her to the point of increasing her favorability by 2 points. Wei Wei Bai said that in the past, she had to die to increase her favorability. Hinachi was such a simple target to increase favorability. She was in despair. Chapter 6:23. Wei Wei Bai opened the game again and started playing silently. The system was anxious. Didn't you want to open a big game to let jerk increase his favorability? Wei Wei Bai. What is favorability? Strategy is not as good as dancing. Let's dance together. 65 and 92. The former increased by so much because she had to put in so much effort. The latter, she did not do anything and just went all out. Wei Wei Bai expressed that this mission could not be done. Whoever wanted to do it could do it. The system was also speechless. Then, it silently took out a pair of discount pants that it had bought and tried it. If the size was not right, it could be returned within 24 hours. In the following days, he dongling started to get busy. To get rid of the image of a useless old man. He quickly gathered all the remaining resources and started to snatch other people's resources by hook or by crook. Then this time he learned his lesson. He did not touch Sire Geo. While working, he was rehabilitating and flirting with Wei Wei Bai from time to time. He dongling had never been so busy. And Wei Wei Bai, who was being flirted with, was also very busy. She was busy watching cartoons and playing games. Hinachi did not flirt with her anymore. But even so, Hinachi's favorability still grew to 95. And he jerk's favorability. She could flirt with him as she wished. 65 unmoved. If the two brothers' favorability could be evenly increased, everything would be fine. He dongling brought Wei Wei Bai to the company every day. After a long time, rumors of them getting back together came out. Hinachi was very busy. He called Wei Wei Bai every day. But during this period, she did not like his Weibo. She rarely picked up his calls. Then he heard the news that she wanted to get back together with his brother. Hinanchi pushed back a few jobs and ran straight to the company with a mask and a hood. Bai Weiwei was tired from playing the game, so she laid down and took a nap. He Dongling finished reading the proposal and looked up to see her sleeping with her eyes closed. Her skin was as white as a cake. He looked at her quietly for a while. Then he slowly pushed the wheelchair to the sofa and said softly, "Weiwei, it's time to get off work." Weiwei Bai did not respond. She had used too much mental and physical strength during this period of time, so she was indeed tired. He Dongling propped up his chin with his hand and looked at her carefully. She was pretty. Delicate eyebrows, thick eyelashes, and skin. She was very pretty. If it wasn't for her family background, he might not have despised her so much in the first place. This was the first time he looked at her carefully. He Dongling looked and looked, his heart unconsciously stirred. A man who was used to flirting, and playful. Basically, Hu Lijing. To him, it was more exciting than emotional. Maybe there was a period of time when they worked well together. He Dongling thought that the little lover was not bad and could develop in the long term. But it had nothing to do with being moved. This was the first time He Dongling felt his heart open up so clearly. He was attracted by her sleeping face. He couldn't help but lower his head and get closer and closer to her lips. There was no lust, nor was it a sensory stimulation. He just wanted to touch her. Ding, He Slag's favorability is at 70. He Dongling hesitated 2 centimeters away from her lips. Her breath blew over, making him nervous for a moment. He was nervous about a kiss that he was used to. He Dongling couldn't help but laugh at himself. He was about to kiss her. The door suddenly opened. He Dongling paused and looked up. He saw Hinanchi's gloomy eyes. / to record this reading record. Chapter 624. He Dongling, who had stopped moving, moved again. Without hesitation, he kissed her in front of Hinanchi. Hinanchi's heart was torn. Before he could feel the pain, his body had already rushed out. But he was at the door and couldn't stop He Dongling's actions. He Dongling's kiss landed on Weiwei Bai's back of hand. Weiwei Bai opened her eyes and looked at He Dongling in confusion. She covered her mouth with her hand. He Dongling didn't feel awkward. Instead, he looked up naturally. "You're awake, Weiwei." Weiwei Bai woke up when she heard the sound of her favorability increasing. Hinanchi had already rushed to the sofa and pushed He Dongling back into the wheelchair. Then he stood in front of the sofa and blocked Weiwei Bai behind him. He looked at the calm He Dongling with red eyes. It was as if he was afraid that He Dongling would come and snatch Weiwei Bai away. He Dongling smiled proudly. "Nanshi, aren't you busy recently? You have time to visit your brother?" Weiwei Bai also stood up and called softly, "Nanshi." Hinanchi's back tensed up, and he turned to look at her. His eyes were filled with unspeakable sadness. Weiwei Bai's scalp tingled when he looked at her. His eyes were full of complaints. It was as if he was an abandoned stray cat or dog that came to wait for her. Hinanchi tried hard to blink and suppress the emotions in his eyes. Then he lowered his head and said, "I've been busy recently. I can't accompany you every day, so don't ignore me." This sentence was said to Weiwei Bai. Such an obvious attitude was no different from a confession. He Dongling frowned and saw Weiwei Bai's puzzled and confused eyes. He knew. Weiwei Bai began to doubt Hinanchi's feelings. The nervousness in his heart appeared again. After all, compared to himself, Hinanchi was indeed a better target. If he were a woman, he would also choose Hinanchi. She was young and ambitious. She was ruthless to the outside world, but she was like a little lamb to her family. Wasn't this the type of man that women liked the most? He Dongling could not be like Hinanchi. He was used to being domineering. So a calculating look flashed through his eyes, and he suddenly said, "Nanshi, it must be hard for you to start over." As expected, Weiwei Bai looked over. He Dongling struck while the iron was hot. "If you fail this time, don't even think about stepping onto the stage for the rest of your life." Hinanchi frowned. He had a feeling that his brother had an ulterior motive for saying those words. But ever since he was young, he wasn't as smart as his brother. Many times he would fall into his trap. What was he trying to do by saying all this? He Dongling suddenly looked at Wei Wei Bai and suddenly revealed a pitiful look. So, if others find out that you like your sister-in-law, your path to stardom will be ruined. This sentence was like a nuclear bomb. It blew up the atmosphere at the scene. Hinanchi felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him from head to toe. He didn't expect that the thoughts that he tried so hard to hide would be exposed by his brother like this. Wei Wei Bai frowned a little strangely at first. You like your sister-in-law? It was as if she couldn't react to who he was referring to when he called her sister-in-law. He Dongling's smile became a little malicious. Yes, Wei Wei, don't you know? Nanshi told me that he likes you. He likes you so much that he would die for you. He nodded. She couldn't muster up any strength. He couldn't even refute. There was only one thought in his mind. She knew that he liked her. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment and finally turned to look at him. Nanshi, is what your brother said true? He nodded. She stiffened for a long time before staking everything on one throw. His eyes burst with an unimaginable light. Yes, I like you. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 96. // Chapter 6, 25. Just because of a disagreement, his favorability towards her increased. How could he win her over properly? Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with an imperceptible hesitation. She wanted to drag Hinanchi down to lower his favorability towards her. Or should she do a belly dance? After Hinanchi finished his confession, he felt that he had used up all the strength in his body and the courage of a lifetime. His heart began to beat rapidly. His face was flushed red, and he looked at Wei Wei Bai, almost unable to breathe. It was as if her answer would cost him his life. He Dongling couldn't help but rub his fingers. He didn't say anything, but he looked at Wei Wei Bai nervously. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have been hit with the pause button. She looked at Hinanchi blankly. Then she lowered her head, as if she couldn't face him. Hinanchi reacted immediately. I'm not listening. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered a few times. There was a trace of fear and hesitation in her eyes. Finally, her lips moved. Nanshi, I'm your... Hinanchi immediately finished her words. You're the person I like. He would never allow her to say such heart-wrenching words like she was his sister-in-law. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Her tone was soft but firm. Nanshi, it's impossible between us. Hinanchi looked up. His eyes were full of panic. His lips trembled a few times. There was a sense of abandonment on his exquisite face. Misty water vapor covered his black eyes. It made him look like a stray dog that no one wanted. His voice was hoarse and choked. It was full of frailty. I don't believe you. It's fine if you don't like me. Anyway, I'll always be with you. After Hinanchi finished speaking, he suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm, trapping her in his arms. Then he raised her chin and kissed her without any hesitation. This kiss was bitter and determined. It didn't allow her to reject it. Wei Wei Bai trembled and widened her eyes. Hinanchi hugged her waist tightly, holding her in his arms. The tip of his tongue pried open her pearly white teeth, breaking into her lips and fiercely plunging her. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was going to suffocate to death. Even his nose was not working properly. He could not take in any oxygen at all. If he Dongling hadn't interrupted, Hinanchi would have kissed her to death. He Dongling picked up a large book beside him and slapped it hard on his back. Hinanchi's body trembled before he released Wei Wei Bai. His fair face was flushed red, and his lips were moist and glossy. His ferocious eyes were now tinged with shyness. I know you don't like me because I'm still young, but if there are no accidents, I still have at least 60 or 70 years to pursue you. Wei Wei Bai had a bad premonition. Hinanchi continued, So, Wei Wei, I'm not afraid of rejection. After all, I'm the man who will pursue you for a lifetime. Ding, Hinanchi's favorability has increased to 98. Wei Wei Bai began to doubt her life. She had rejected him. She had clearly rejected him. She had indeed rejected him. Why is her favorability still increasing? There was no separation in life and death. There was no heart-wrenching. Just like that, the favorability points rose to 98. Wei Wei Bai wondered if she could still properly pursue him. After Hinanchi let go of her, his courage finally ran out. Although he said it without any hesitation, he still felt his heart ache. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would say something that would make him feel uncomfortable again. He immediately said, "I'm leaving first. Wei Wei, there's still a job that I can't cancel." // Chapter 626. Hinanchi felt that to support Wei Wei Bai in the future, he had to work harder. Wei Wei Bai looked haggard as she watched Hinanchi walk out of the door. He dongling snorted coldly. This confession is simply unreliable. What love? Young people don't have any sense of responsibility. They say they love, and they say they don't love. He wasn't done yet. Hinanchi ran back, panting. He stuck his head out of the door. He said to Wei Wei Bai, "Oh right, my brother is bad, mean, and shameless. Don't believe anything he says." He dongling. Hinanchi dropped a bomb, and he's paralyzed. I don't think he can use his lower body, so don't marry him. He dongling's veins popped out. Hinanchi wasn't afraid of death. He added another layer of insurance. He has bad breath, foot odor, snores, doesn't bathe, and picks his nose. He dongling's face was as black as a pot. Hinanchi, you're asking for death, aren't you? Hinanchi pulled the mask over his face expressionlessly, then turned and ran. Anyway, as long as Wei Wei Bai hesitated and didn't marry his brother, Hinanchi was capable of doing anything. He dongling saw Hinanchi run out. If he wasn't crippled, he would have rushed up and beat the shit out of that bastard. He heaved a sigh of relief, afraid that he would really be angered to death. Then he looked at Wei Wei Bai and was stunned. She sat on the sofa, her eyes dim and her face pale. He dongling couldn't help but say, "Wei Wei." Wei Wei looked up in hindsight and forced a smile. "It's nothing, I just didn't expect Nanchi to have such thoughts about me." He dongling was about to say a few words to attack Hinanchi. Wei Wei Bai said softly, "There are people who like a woman like me." He dongling's heart was stabbed. He frowned and said, "What are you saying? You're quite nice." If it was a lie to flirt in the past, now, this sentence was the truth in He dongling's heart. So what if she had a family background, money, and ability to work? Wei Wei Bai could leave those women behind. Life and death, rich and poor. It wasn't bullshit. Wei Wei Bai had turned them into reality. How could there not be people like her? Wei Wei laughed at herself. "My family is poor. I've been a hostess. I've been married. I have no education. I have no special skills. My work ability is average. I have self-awareness." He dongling's lips and tongue were a little dry. "These are all external appearances." Wei Wei calmly said, "But people look at the outside. You were in such a hurry to tell me that Nanchi likes me. Isn't it because you want me to recognize my identity and not have any delusions of being with your brother?" He dongling wanted to refute. "I just wanted to let you know that his love is not reliable. Why are you so unconfident? You deserve a better person's love." Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. "Do you think a woman like me, who was abandoned by you, deserves a better person's love?" This sentence made He dongling silent. Wei Wei suddenly lowered her head. Her clean and beautiful face, her clear and incomparably cold eyes. She said softly, word by word, "Could it be that the better person is you?" He dongling's heart was hit hard, and he lowered his head awkwardly. His fingers gripped the wheelchair armrest tightly. He dongling was good at flirting and had seen all kinds of situations. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. He decided to get back together with her. He liked her. That was the truth. But under Wei Wei Bai's cold and calm gaze, he couldn't say a single word. / save button. Chapter 627. He liked her, but how long could this last? He dongling had no confidence in himself. Wei Wei Bai saw his hesitation and couldn't help but laugh at herself. "I'm so stupid. What do I expect from you?" He dongling heard this and felt like he was hit by a wave, instantly waking him up. She had him in her heart and was waiting for him to turn back. He dongling's lips trembled. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "I'm going back. It's time for work today." After that, she turned around and left without hesitation. After walking out of the door, Wei Wei Bai stood there for a while. "System, what's wrong?" Wei Wei Bai, waiting for the favorability. Ding. He dongling's favorability is at 75. System, Wei Wei Bai smiled calmly and then walked forward. He Dongling looked at the sunset in silence and only remembered to light up a cigarette after a long time. He thought a lot and realized that he did have a special and irreplaceable affection for Wei Wei Bai. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but at least for now, he really liked her. Hinanchi finished his work and was resting in the dressing room. He tiredly held his forehead with his hand. He didn't dare to make the call in the past few days. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would refuse to pick up his call. She knew what he was thinking. Initially, he wanted to wait until he was more mature and confident before confessing his feelings. If he confessed now, he wouldn't even have a 10% chance of winning. Hinanchi sighed and still made the call. But no one picked up. Hinanchi's hope turned into disappointment. When he automatically hung up, there was only despair left in his eyes. She didn't like him. Hinanchi's eyes were sore. He blinked, afraid that he would cry and look immature. He could only hold it in. He bit his lower lip and mustered up the courage to call again. But there was still no answer. Hinanchi was not the kind of person who would back down. He transferred the voice message. Wei Wei. He hesitated for a moment before repeating himself. I really like you. It doesn't matter if you don't like me. I can wait. 1 year, 10 years, a lifetime. Even if she was married, he would still wait. Until the day of his death. Hinanchi hung up the phone. His heart was filled with passionate love, but it only turned into a few words. But this was his truest thought. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of the dressing room. Hinanchi thought it was his assistant, so he immediately got up to open the door. The door opened. A white handkerchief was pressed against his face, and the smell of anesthesia filled his nose. Hinanchi did not have time to struggle and soon lost consciousness. Wei Wei Bai, who had just come out of the shower, saw a call from Hinanchi on her phone. There was also a phone message. After she finished listening, she sighed and said, Tongzi, it's rare to meet such a pure and cute target. It's easy to get favorability. If it came with that side mission from he scum, it was as if he was here for a vacation. The system said, why don't you reply that you like it, and the favorability will be 100. Wei Wei Bai said, you're not afraid of belly dancing. The system said helplessly, of course I am. It's too embarrassing. But I've already bought the pants. It's a pity not to dance. I still have a few days of life left. Buy Wei Wei. In the end, what did you buy with my hard-earned life? Hinanchi was kidnapped for 3 hours. Wei Wei Bai and the system only then realized. The full article is at https://www.sashu.com/. Chapter 628. Hinanchi was too easy to capture, so even the system was too lazy to monitor him. Instead, it focused on Dongling. The male lead's life is in danger. The system frowned. Wei Wei Bai. Do those people want money or lives? The system opened its heavenly eye. They want money and lives. Dongling is too anxious to get up, but he can't touch the boss-level cannon fodder, 9th Master's resources, so he can only steal from others. With this, he naturally had more enemies. And Hinanchi was Dongling's younger brother. Dongling was very vigilant, so people couldn't get close to him easily. Those who had a grudge against Dongling could only kidnap Hinanchi. Wei Wei Bai thought about it, and was about to call Dongling. The phone call came. She picked up the phone. Dongling's voice was hoarse and gloomy. Wei Wei, Nanchi has been kidnapped. Wei Wei Bai immediately changed her expression and said anxiously, What's going on? Dongling smiled bitterly. It's my fault. The people I offended joined forces to kidnap Nanchi. It'll probably be difficult to rescue him this time. Wei Wei Bai also felt that it was troublesome. In this situation, she could only use her life points to buy some life-saving things from the system. Otherwise, Hinanchi would definitely be in trouble. Dongling's breathing on the other end of the phone became heavy. Wei Wei, they have a request. Wei Wei Bai. How much? Dongling hesitated. It's not money, it's a person's life. Wei Wei Bai paused. Your life? Dongling. No, they want me to assassinate 9th Master, then use 9th Master's death to exchange for Nanchi's life. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss. What kind of deal was this? Dongling probably knew that Wei Wei Bai didn't understand this exchange method. He explained patiently, Ninth Master has been covering the sky with one hand for too long. He's even more hated than me. Many people can't wait for him to die. However, no one had the ability to take his life. I was the first one who had brazenly gone against him and survived, so those people treated me as cannon fodder and asked me to kill him. Dongling was very clear. This was a dead end. If he didn't assassinate her, Nancy would die. If he did, he would be the one to die. She might not be able to be saved, and Master Geo might not be able to kill him either. Wei Bai. This kidnapping ransom is very creative. Dongling continued. Nanchi has been a good child since he was a child. Other than his foul mouth, he has the best temperament in the family. I plan to accept this condition. Usually, they would quarrel and poach each other. At the critical moment, they were still brothers. Dongling could be a jerk to everyone, but he couldn't be a jerk to this younger brother whom he had watched grow up. Wei Bai's mind kept turning. She followed her train of thought and said, Dongling, calm down. You can't save Nanchi like this. Dongling said, this is the only way. I'm here to say goodbye to you today. Wei Bai's tone darkened. You don't have to go. I'll go. Dongling thought that there was something wrong with his ears. What? Wei Bai didn't hesitate and emphasized, I'll go. Dongling raised his voice. Wei Bai, don't joke like this. Wei Bai was silent for a while. When Ninth Master let you go last time, I felt that he was interested in me. Of course, this meant that a father had feelings for his daughter. After all, she was acting according to Ninth Master's daughter's personality. It would be strange if Ninth Master didn't have any reaction. / Chapter 6:29. But Dongling didn't know that. When he heard that it was interesting, he thought of the way Jiu Yi looked at Wei Bai last time. His heart immediately jumped. Don't ruin yourself. Wei Bai. Wei Bai's indifferent voice sounded. I've been a hostess in a bar before. I've seen all kinds of things. It's not unheard of to accompany an old man and then kill him. There are many hostesses outside who marry old men and then kill them to steal their property. Dongling's voice trembled. I don't agree. I won't let you go. Wei Bai calmly said. Dongling, you must have fallen in love with me. In the past, you were so cruel to me that you wouldn't care even if I died. Dongling's breathing became chaotic, and his words also became chaotic. Now is not the time to talk about this. Wei, don't get involved in this matter. Wei Bai smiled, full of helplessness. Even if you force me into a corner, I don't want you to die. She didn't just save Nanchi's life. It was also Dongling's life. Dongling immediately thought it through. He listened to the phone in a daze. He didn't know why, but his eyes became wet. The He family fell. He had nothing. He didn't cry even when his legs were disabled. This woman didn't want him to die at all. It made him completely unable to suppress his pain and emotions. Ding, Slag's favorability has increased to 80. Wei Bai heard the sound of the favorability increasing and directly hung up the phone. Then she went to pick a dress. It was light blue with a collar that reached her shoulders. It was a little princess dress that reached below her knees. Then she tidied up her hair. She looked at the photo of Jiu Ye's daughter and put on makeup. The system gave her the information of Jiu Ye's daughter while nagging. Actually, belly dancing is also fine. You don't have to attack Slag's favorability. To attack the favorability, Wei Bai really started a big game strategy. Assassinating Jiu Yi was simply a matter of minutes. Wei Bai held the lipstick in her hand. I've developed an obsessive-compulsive disorder in so many worlds. If I don't complete the side mission, won't I break my undefeated record? The system said, you can even get obsessive-compulsive disorder from this. Wei Bai, of course, more importantly, I saw the pants you bought. It's too ugly. I refuse to wear it. He would rather die trying to get the strategy. She would definitely not wear those leopard print pants that exposed her, but in the back and had a chrysanthemum in the front. They could reflect light and had a colorful glitter effect. Wei Bai looked at the information and realized that it was Ninth Master's birthday banquet tonight. All the influential people in the city were there. Dongling also received an invitation, but because of Nanchi's matter, he definitely didn't have time to go. Wei planned to go around and walk around in front of Jiu Yi. Dongling's favorability was different from Nanchi's. Hinanchi was the kind of person who would give back dozens of times more favorability if you gave him a good reaction. Dongling, on the other hand, was the kind of person who needed others to do everything for him. So he would be stingy and willing to increase his favorability. The title of Scum Man, Dongling, was indeed well-deserved. Dongling knew that things were not good when he was hung up on. Wei Wei Bai wanted to assassinate Ninth Master, but how could she do it? Even if it was him, he would only be sending himself to death. He only wanted to save Nanshi, so he had no choice but to try without hesitation despite knowing that it was impossible. But why did Wei Wei Bai want to go? She would just be sacrificing herself for nothing. Chapter 630. Idiot! Dongling was anxious and suddenly stood up. Stand up? His legs suddenly got better. If it was normal times, Dongling might be very happy. But now, he rushed out anxiously and called the driver to stop Wei Wei Bai. Along the way, he mobilized his men to stop Wei Wei Bai. The news said that Wei Wei Bai was going to attend Master Jio's birthday party. That old man was interested in her. Not to mention the assassination. Wei Wei Bai's face was so popular with Master Jio. That perverted old man wouldn't do anything to her, right? Dongling rushed to the birthday party. It was held in Master Jio's living room. He also had an invitation, so Dongling felt that he should be able to stop Wei Wei Bai. When Dongling got out of the car, he saw Wei Wei Bai had just walked in. He shouted anxiously, "Wei Wei, come back." Wei Wei Bai stopped in her tracks and stood by the door. A lamp was on her head, and the light shone on her body, giving her a hazy and holy light. She smiled, and her eyes were filled with light. She was so beautiful. Dongling only felt that his heart was beating uncontrollably and his chest hurt from the impact. His voice became hoarse. "I like you, I like you." This sentence seemed to be impulsive, but at the same time, it was as if he had gone through a difficult test and should carefully make a confession. Ding, he Slag's favorability is at 85. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. She looked at him deeply, then turned and walked in. Dongling trembled and immediately followed. But Dongling was stopped at the door. He took out the invitation, but it was useless. It was as if he was deliberately stopped. Dongling thought about it and felt a chill all over his body. Jiu Yi, that rotten old man, had indeed taken a fancy to Wei Wei Bai. He remembered what she had said. Because she had been a hostess, she didn't care even if an old man coveted her. Dongling stood outside the door. He couldn't help but take out a cigarette, but his fingers were shaking so much that he couldn't hold it. In the end, he cursed himself. Bastard. If it weren't for him, Wei Wei Bai wouldn't have been forced to this point. Hinanchi's tears finally fell from his eyes. He wept silently as he struggled to light a cigarette and smoke. His back was like a stray dog, full of despair and haggard. He finished smoking a cigarette and finally raised his head. His eyes were full of gloomy madness and the determination to stake everything on a single throw. Dongling returned to his car. He made a call and ordered half of his men to go and rescue his brother. The other party might kill the hostage, so he did not dare to act rashly. But Dongling couldn't care less now. He knew that Wei Wei Bai wouldn't succeed. If he didn't save her now, Wei Wei Bai's corpse would be waiting for him at dawn. Just now, he had repeated hundreds of ways for her to die in his mind. It was a heart-wrenching pain. Dongling took out his pistol and sat in the back seat of the car. He waited for the other half of his men to come over. All these years, he couldn't bear to take out his accumulation even if the He family collapsed. It was completely exposed. But Dongling was surprisingly calm. He wanted to save Inanshi. He also wanted to save Wei Wei Bai. However, the matter this time had forced him into a dead end. Perhaps no one could be saved. All three of them were going to die. Dongling still made the decision to do his best, even if he had to die. It was better to die with the person he liked than to live like a dog. Wasn't this also a kind of happiness? // Chapter 631. When Wei Wei Bai walked in, the banquet had already begun. She asked the system, "What did you buy?" The system replied, "Because you still lack 2 points of favorability from Nanshi and 5 points of favorability from Dongling. So I bought you a 10-minute IQ lowering drug. Within 10 minutes, that awesome cannon fodder Elder Joe's IQ will be as low as if he has no brain. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. The system was afraid that she would say that it spent money recklessly, so it said earnestly, spend what you should. If you stab Elder Geo to death, he Dongling's favorability will immediately rise to over 100. She didn't care. His favorability would rise on its own. There was no need for a strategy. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, since I've already bought it, forget it. I can even tolerate that weird pair of pants. What else in this world can I tolerate? The system was silent. It then took out 2 pairs of pants. Leopard print with rainbow sparkles. It looked pretty good. After Wei Wei Bai entered, someone led her to Elder Geo. Elder Geo was still the same person who wore a 3-kilogram gold chain, clearly showing that he was very rich. His hair was gray and his eyes were full of darkness. But when he saw Wei Wei Bai, he still had a flash and his eyes were wet. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a blue princess dress. She stood under the crystal chandelier like a little princess. She seemed a little nervous. The people at the banquet made her feel a little helpless, but her eyes were bright and cute. Hello, Elder Geo, Wei Wei Bai said politely, but her head was slightly tilted and her mouth was smiling. Elder Geo looked at her blankly for 3 seconds. You really look like her. Wei Wei Bai smiled. Like who? Elder Geo, my daughter. Wei Wei Bai thought of the information about Elder Geo's daughter. When Elder Geo was young, he had a lover. Because he was in the underworld, he had to leave her. That white moonlight gave birth to his only daughter. Zhu Yi spent more than 10 years to stabilize his position, and at that time, Bai Yueguang also contacted him. She was dying of illness and hoped that he would come and take her daughter away. That was the first time he knew that he had a daughter. When he was fighting with someone, he had injured his manhood, so he couldn't have any children. This daughter was almost identical to Bai Yueguang. She was an extremely beautiful child. She had practically become 9th Master's flesh and blood. Later on, that daughter died because she took a bullet for 9th Master. End of story. Hence, when Sire 9 saw Wei Wei Bai, who resembled his daughter, his fatherly love surged up. The system reminded him, the IQ-lowering drug has started to be used. This thing might be more irritating to the user at the beginning, so be careful. Wei Wei Bai. I feel like there's a hidden meaning in the system's words. Don't tell me that this thing has some terrible consequences? Elder Ju stretched out his hand, and his gaze turned loving. All the things related to calmness in his mind began to disappear. He kept thinking about how his daughter looked like. That child wasn't raised by him, but by his wife, who was separated from him. She was innocent and stubborn, but she liked him very much. He was clearly in the underworld, but she wasn't afraid. However, she tried her best to pull him back on the right track from the underworld. Originally, he had already started to soften and wanted to clear his name. However, her death made him completely lose all hope. He started to take revenge on others. Later on, when he didn't have anyone to take revenge on, he started to torture whoever he didn't like. Anyway, his daughter, his only child, was dead. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. /transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. / you can see it the next time you open the bookshelf. Chapter 632. The existence of this world was meaningless to him. As for Wei Wei Bai, although they did not look alike, her temperament and actions were very similar to his Nan Nan. Sire Geo reached out his hand. Can I hold your hand? Wei Wei Bai was still hesitating whether to hold his hand, but his gaze was already a little dazed. Actually, today is not my birthday, but my daughter's birthday. Every year, I would hold a birthday party for her like this. She looked very good in a blue dress. Sire Ju looked at Wei Wei Bai in a blue dress, and the pain in his heart surged. He looked at Wei Wei Bai, and the more he looked at her, the more he felt that his Nan Nan was like this. A grown-up Nan Nan. Wei Wei Bai hesitantly raised her finger, then slowly reached over and placed it on Sire Ju's hand. Her eyes were filled with worry. Then I wish your daughter a happy birthday. Don't be sad. Sire Ju's expression became even more dazed. Too similar? Can you call me daddy? Wei Wei Bai. His IQ has dropped too much. Even if a normal person saw someone who looked like their daughter, they would not call him daddy. But for the sake of the mission, she forced herself to call Daddy. She also thought of Bai Chongyin's appearance more than 10 times in her heart and apologized to her father. When Sire Jiu heard this, the tears in his eyes fell. These were the tears of an old father and had nothing to do with his terrifying status and power. He was just sad for his child. He said repeatedly, Okay, you're very good. Do you have anything you want for your birthday? His IQ was getting lower and lower, and for a moment, he thought of Wei Wei Bai as his own daughter. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment, then said tentatively, I want to save someone. Sire Jiu's gaze was kind. If you want to save the world, Daddy will become Superman to save it. Wei Wei Bai, his IQ was really too low. The effects of the medicine were awesome. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to say, I want to save Inanshi, but he was kidnapped. Jiu Yi nodded. Is it the guy you like? Daddy will go save him now, and then kidnap him for you as a present. Wei Wei Bai. Jiu Yi turned around and instructed his trusted aide to send out his most elite men to save Inanshi. His confidant looked at him worriedly, but he still nodded. Sire Jiu turned to her and said, Darling, is there anything else you want for your birthday? Daddy is rich, lots and lots of money. I can buy anything you like. Wei Wei Bai, I don't want anything. Can I leave? Elder Jiu was stunned. His expression became aggrieved. An old man wrinkled his face. He was just like an abandoned Sharpei. The system was confused as well. Aren't you going to kill him? It was afraid that she wouldn't be able to kill Master Jiu, so it specially bought a drug to lower her IQ. It had used its privilege to buy this thing at an internal price. Ordinary systems did not have the authority to buy such a special effect cheat like this. Wei Wei Bai. Why would I want to kill him? Didn't someone save Inanshi? If the goal is achieved, there's no need to kill. Your host isn't a homicidal maniac. As for telling Dongling that she wanted to kill someone, it was just to see if the favorability level could go up to 90. In the end, it was still stuck at 85. The system said hesitantly, There's a problem with that IQ-lowering drug. Wei Wei Bai was worried. What's the problem? The system said, When I buy it, I can choose a hint. It will make people with low IQ want to fulfill the hint. // Chapter 633. Wei Wei Bai had a bad feeling. Then, she saw Sire 9 take out a gun and stuff it into Wei Wei Bai's hands. He looked up with a kind face. If you want to leave, can you kill me? Wei Wei Bai. All right, she knew what the system was hinting at. This shouldn't be called a low IQ drug. This was a brainwashing drug. Sire 9 looked at her tiredly and lovingly. After Nanan died, I blamed myself for many years. It's too tiring to live. Seeing you is like seeing my daughter back. So, dying in your hands is my wish. Wei Wei Bai, she felt like she was watching a melodramatic drama. These lousy lines, this low IQ plot. Was there really no problem? Wei Wei Bai tried to pull back her hand and advised kindly, Your daughter definitely won't blame you. You should live well. The low IQ Sire 9's tears fell. You're really a kind child. Seeing you is like seeing my daughter. Wei Wei Bai finally pulled back her hand and stuffed the gun back into Sire 9's hand. Then I'll leave. Goodbye. Inanshi should have someone to rescue him. Dongling's favorability was only at 85. Wei Wei Bai could only think of other ways to increase Dongling's favorability. As for Sire 9, she felt that there was nothing she could use. And if she was still here after 10 minutes, Sire 9, who had regained his IQ, would probably skin her and cook her. Sire 9 was reluctant to leave. Stay a little longer. Accompany this lonely old man. Wei Wei Bai, if you stay any longer, once the low IQ drug wears off, it will be the system's turn to be lonely. Because the host was killed by the cannon fodder boss. She turned to leave in a hurry. No, I won't stay. Goodbye. Just as she finished speaking, there was a gunshot behind her. Bai Wei Wei's footsteps stiffened, and she looked back. Master Jiu held the gun and fired a shot at his chest. And then he died. Wei Wei Bai was dumbfounded. What's wrong, Tongzi? The system was speechless for a moment before saying, It's like this. When you passed the gun to him, the muzzle was pointed at his chest, and the safety was off. So when he was about to take the gun, he accidentally fired and killed himself. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of magic is this? How can he accidentally kill himself like this? She couldn't help but say, this IQ-lowering drug is too low. Lord Joe accidentally killed himself. The people who saw Lord Joe commit suicide immediately screamed. As for Ninth Master's men, they also began to panic. A group of people rushed in front of Master Joe, wanting to save him. Several people rushed over to grab Wei Wei Bai, because Wei Wei Bai was the last person to speak to Ninth Master. With that, Elder Joe committed suicide. So his suicide definitely had something to do with Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai immediately lifted her skirt and ran. She didn't take 2 steps. Dense gunshots came from the door. A group of people rushed in. They were as aggressive as an army. And the man in the lead had a sinister gaze and a cold expression. It was Dongling, who looked a little crazy. He had suffered a lot in the outside world. Thinking that Wei Wei Bai might have been sullied by Ninth Master, that old man in his 60s or 70s, his heart ached crazily. Zhou Ye's people immediately pulled out their guns and madly fired at Dongling. Wei Wei Bai was speechless as she looked at the scene of the gang fighting. She felt that she didn't transmigrate to a normal world in the modern world. She had transmigrated to a gangster film. // Chapter 634. In this day and age, there were actually 2 groups of people fighting each other with guns and fighting for territory. The system immediately said, quickly turn around and leave. Don't get hit by the bullets. Wei Wei Bai nodded. She lowered her body and ran towards the door with an ugly expression. Dongling anxiously looked for Wei Wei Bai among the flying bullets. He was most afraid that he wouldn't be able to make it in time and would see Wei Wei Bai lying under Sire 9. Wei Wei Bai ran very quickly and was not far away from Dongling. Dongling also looked up and saw her. Ecstasy flashed across his face. Wei Wei Bai rushed too quickly and stepped on the cake that was pushed over by the crowd. She pounced over. Dongling just happened to meet her and reached out to hug her body that had rushed into his arms. However, Wei Wei Bai felt that something just happened to shoot into her back. Then, it rushed into her heart. Wei Wei Bai. The system immediately gave a sharp warning. The host's fatal part has been shot. Her life is in great danger. The minimum life guarantee is automatically activated. Ding! System. The body is on the verge of death. The minimum life guarantee will expire in 10 minutes. Please complete the mission and leave this world as soon as possible. If the heart was injured, she would definitely die. The minimum life guarantee was useless. Because of the minimum life guarantee, Wei Wei Bai didn't feel any pain. She just felt a little dizzy and her vision turned black. Even if there was no pain, she could also feel the suffocating premonition of death. She opened her mouth and there was the taste of blood in the depths of her throat. Dongling hugged her and hurriedly evacuated without thinking. Most of the people in the underworld in this city were at this banquet. After today, more than half of the underworld forces would be lost. Dongling only hoped that Wei Wei Bai wouldn't be dragged into this. After running out of the door, Dongling anxiously stuffed Wei Wei Bai into the passenger seat of the car. Then, he hurriedly opened the door on the other side and sat in the driver's seat. Wei Wei, I've already sent people to save Nanshi. Master 9 won't let us off, so let's go abroad tonight, okay? Dongling's car sped out. He looked at the road as he spoke. Halfway through his sentence, he saw that his fingers were covered in blood. He was not injured, so where did the blood come from? Dongling stared blankly at his blood-stained fingers. Finally, with trembling fear in his eyes, he looked at Wei Wei Bai. Her head lay limply on the seat. Her face was deathly pale, and her eyes were somewhat unfocused. A large amount of blood burst out from her chest. It was the bullet that had pierced through the heart, causing blood to gush out from the wound. It was a ghastly sight. Dongling couldn't help but tremble madly. His voice trembled. Wei Wei? Bai Wei Wei didn't say anything. Instead, she struggled to look at him. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she smiled. Dongling was heartbroken by this smile. He finally reacted. This bullet was aimed at him. At that time, she threw herself into his arms and blocked the bullet. He suddenly stepped on the accelerator and the car sped out. Hospital, they had to get to the hospital quickly. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said softly, I'm sleepy. Dongling said fearfully, Don't sleep. We're almost at the hospital. Wei Wei Bai, I didn't expect to die like this. Stepping on a cake and dying was completely out of Wei Wei Bai's expectations. He Dongling thought that she was saying that dying for him was something that she had never thought of. He had hurt her so deeply. Perhaps she was heartbroken, so she had no intention of forgiving him. / for the convenience of your next reading, you can click on this save button. Chapter 635. But at the last moment, she used her own life to save him. He Dongling felt like his entire body was being torn apart. This kind of pain made him want to roar out loud. He couldn't even speak and could only drive to the hospital. Don't sleep. I'll promise you anything. I'm trash and trash. Don't you think it's not worth dying for me? Why would she die for a trash like him? She clearly had more right to live in this world than he did. Ding. He Slag's affection is at 95. Side mission completed. Congratulations to the host for avoiding punishment. Wei Wei Bai gave a weak snort. The system was already counting down. There were only 5 minutes left. The system's tone became hurried. Wei Wei, don't sleep. The affection isn't full yet. If you leave this world now, without the protection of the male leads 100 affection, your soul may be damaged during transmigration. She still had 150 days of life in the real world. So even if the mission failed, she wouldn't die. But the system was worried that Wei Wei Bai's soul wouldn't be able to handle the consequences of failing. Wei Wei Bai's mind was so heavy that she could immediately fall asleep. Luckily, He Dongling's babbling voice made her find a bit of a reason. She suddenly said, Nanshi, have you been saved? With Jiu Yi and He Dongling's people, He Nanshi's chances of being saved greatly increased. And the system didn't remind the male lead that his life was in danger. So Wei Wei Bai felt that he should have been saved. He Dongling pursed his lips. I've been saved. He didn't have time to answer the phone, so he didn't know He Nanshi's situation. But to appease Wei Wei Bai, he could immediately confirm anything he wasn't sure about. Wei Wei Bai weakly took out her cell phone and dialed He Nanshi's number. She could only pray that He Nanshi's affection would still casually increase. Otherwise, Wei Wei Bai felt that she would really fail the mission this time. The call quickly connected. Hello? Wei Wei? Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief and couldn't help but smile. Yes, Nanshi, I heard your message. Her voice was a little hoarse, but it was almost the same as usual. Who said I don't like you? How could I bear to let you wait for me for a lifetime? On the other end of the line, He Nanshi, who had just been saved, was silent. The system was calmly counting down the seconds. 1 minute left. Ding. The male lead's favorability is at 100. When Wei Wei Bai heard the notification that her favorability had increased, her smile deepened. Sure enough, the target of this plane was an angel. Her favorable impression of him still filled up so easily. Detected that the host is on the brink of death, forcibly leaving the plane world. Countdown of 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Escape successful. She closed her eyes quietly and dropped her hand. Her phone fell to the side. He Nanshi's cheers suddenly came from the other side of the phone. Really? Wei Wei, you've accepted me? I'll be good to you. For a lifetime, no. For many lifetimes. I'll love you. God, today is my lucky day. This silly dog's cry of happiness was clear even without the loudspeaker. He Dongling's car slowed down and finally stopped in front of the hospital. But he didn't dare to look at Wei Wei Bai. He didn't open the car door and enter the hospital. Instead, he sat in the driver's seat in a daze, his bloody fingers holding the steering wheel. On the steering wheel, blood stains were all over, as if something was broken in front of his eyes. Download the https://www.sashu.com/ Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com// Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com Download the full article. https://m.sashu.com Chapter 636. He dongling suddenly said in a hoarse voice, Wei Wei, do you know? I just found out today that I've fallen in love with someone. For the first time, he truly felt his heart throbbing. It was like a tidal wave or an earthquake, shattering his frozen heart. This strange feeling made it impossible for him to escape. A desperate silence spread in the car. He dongling slowly stretched out his hand. If I were to propose to you now, would you be willing? If you're not willing, reject me. Wei Wei Bai maintained the same posture. She did not move. He dongling continued, You're silent, which means you agree. If you really want to reject me, you can let go of my hand. He dongling said, and finally held her weak fingers. He leaned his head against the seat, tears flowing from his eyes. He said hoarsely, You agreed to remarry me. You can't go back on your words. Hinachi's happy voice came from the phone. You know what? I bought the ring. I was thinking of wooing you for 8 to 10 years before I could use it. All right, I've been looking for a house recently. Don't live at home. If that useless old man is here, he'll make a move on you. But you don't have to worry about him in the future. I won't let him hurt you. I'll do my best to protect you. Wei Wei? What's wrong? Am I scaring you because I'm too happy? I'm too complacent, aren't I? Say something to me. In the car, he dongling held Wei Wei Bai's hand silently. Her hand gradually lost its warmth. Outside the car, the morning sun gradually entered the car. He dongling knew she would never be able to respond to Hinachi, just like how her fingers would never be able to hold his hand again. Host's mission is completed. You've gained 30 days of life points and an additional 10 days of life points. A total of 190 life points. Deducting the semi-paralysis medicine for 10 days, 2 pairs of open crotch pants for 2.5 days, a total of 5 days, and the IQ-lowering medicine for 15 days. The minimum life subsistence allowance will be activated for 10 days. The system will limit one's supper for 5 days. Congratulations, after deducting 55 days, you still have 135 days of life left. Wei Wei Bai had just woken up when she was hit by a series of system notifications. She clutched her chest. Perhaps it was because the plane had been shot. The dull pain was still there. She couldn't accept the fact that the life points she earned from the quest that she had risked her life to complete was not enough. He had already calmed down. In any case, with Yi Yuxuan around, he could just treat the mission reward as charity and feed it to the dogs. Wei Wei Bai struggled to get up. Sure enough, she was still in the hospital. She felt that her home was actually the hospital. Ever since the day of the heart attack, he hadn't been able to leave the hospital for more than a few days, even after traveling through so many planes. Wei Wei Bai decided to look for Yi Yuxuan first. She didn't want to get some HP from him. After traveling through a few more planes, she was going to die. Wei Wei Bai said, Slagstem, where is Yi Yuxuan? The system finally dared to speak. I think he's sleeping next door. He had a few days of meetings with medical experts from all over the world. He wanted to find out why you're sleeping from time to time. He's too tired, so he takes a nap. Wei Wei Bai was touched. If Yi Yuxuan didn't have some problems with his brain and his skill at picking up girls is so bad, I might have liked him long ago, the system said. Then do you like him now? //. Chapter 637. Wei Wei Bai fell into deep silence. Just when the system thought that she would not answer, Wei Wei Bai suddenly said softly and blankly, Do I have the right to like others? After she finished speaking, her smile had a hint of bitterness. To survive, I do everything with the purpose of a strategy. The shadow of death hangs over my head. If I really like someone, that person is really unlucky. It was not that she did not want to like someone. It was not that she did not have any feelings for Yi Yuxuan. But Wei Wei Bai knew that it was useless for her to like anyone now. For someone who only had 100 days to live, romance was not the first priority. The system had seen many sides of Wei Wei Bai. Anger, wit, calmness, composure. It had never seen her so sad. It comforted her. You can do it. I believe that you will definitely get 100 years of life and live smoothly. Wei Wei Bai smiled helplessly. I hope so, but can you throw away those 2 pairs of pants? The system hesitated. Wei Wei Bai, if you don't throw them away, we are not friends anymore. Wei Wei Bai said that the side missions were completed. She would not let her see the 5 days of life again. The system said hesitantly, "I think it looks pretty good. Wei Wei Bai. Friendship over, goodbye." Wei Wei Bai, who forced herself to be awake, got off the bed. She found that maybe it was because of the good care her body was not that tired. She planned to go next door and flirt with Yi Yuxuan. She wanted to see if she could get some life. When she went next door, she found that it was also a ward. But this ward was wrapped up by someone. When she opened the door, she saw a tall figure with his back facing her. Half of his face was covered by messy short hair, and he was sleeping quietly without making a sound. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment. Thinking about how he had been in meetings for a few days because of her illness, he was indeed tired. She felt that it would be better to wait until he was well rested before attacking. Wei Wei Bai lifted her feet and was about to walk out. Yi Yuxuan suddenly convulsed. He groaned in pain and curled up his body. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and immediately walked over. "Yi Yuxuan, what happened to you?" She had just walked to his side when his hand grabbed her arm. Wei Wei Bai was in so much pain that she sucked in a deep breath. "Yi Yuxuan, let go of me. It hurts a lot." Yi Yuxuan suddenly opened her eyes when she heard her business. Wei Wei Bai saw that his eyes were bloodshot and his handsome face was covered in cold sweat. He did not move. He looked at her without blinking. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought he was going to say something, he suddenly closed his eyes and fainted again. And before he fainted, in the end, the dreams in his mind could no longer bear the intense, tsunami-like pain, and they began to collapse one by one. It was no longer a dream-like pain through a hazy wall. Instead, it was neat and tidy, and there was no obstruction. It was a heart-wrenching roar. The follow-up to superstar brother-in-law's socialite sister-in-law. He dongling knocked on the door of the music room. There was motionless food at the door. He glanced at the food plate. His face was deathly pale as he said emotionlessly, "Today is the day of her burial. Come with me, Nanshi." There was no movement from inside the door. He dongling was too lazy to coax him. Everyone was in pain. The difference was who could bear it better. "Nanshi, the last call Master Nine made before he died was to save you," he dongling said calmly. At that time, the only person who could make Master Nine make this call was Wei Wei. // to facilitate your next reading, you can click on. Chapter 638. That filthy Master Jiu must have agreed to some terrible request from Wei Wei. That was why he was willing to agree to save Nanshi. He dongling smiled bitterly. "I know you won't forgive me. If I hadn't been so hasty, we wouldn't have made so many enemies. You wouldn't have been kidnapped, and Wei Wei wouldn't have died. But Wei Wei saved our lives. Don't waste it, or else you won't have the face to face her when you die." He dongling waited quietly for a while after he finished speaking. Nanshi still didn't react. He laughed at himself and turned to leave. He didn't take 2 steps before the door opened. Nanshi walked out. His hair was disheveled and his face was dirty. He was still wearing the same clothes as the day he was rescued. There was a sour smell all over his body, and his eyes were cloudy. He didn't know how long it had been since he slept. He didn't say anything and just squatted down. He picked up the rice that had been cold for a few hours, lowered his head, and started to eat. He dongling stood there without moving his body. Nanshi ate very quickly. It didn't matter if his face was full of rice grains. His eyes were lifeless, and his face was extremely ugly. None of his fans could recognize him. After Nanshi finished eating, he went to take a shower. He washed very carefully. After showering, he wore a black suit. He shaved and tidied his hair. Soon, except for being a little thin and haggard, his face was a little paler. Nanshi regained his usual handsome appearance. Even the childishness on his face had disappeared, and there was a sense of desolation and maturity. He wanted to see Wei Wei. He couldn't go dirty. Nanshi was expressionless as he went to the cemetery with his brother. The 2 brothers were surprisingly similar. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were dim. Not many people came to the funeral. They were all from the company. Wei Wei Bai's urn was buried in the coffin. When the lid of the coffin was slowly closed, the coffin was closed. Nanshi's body suddenly swayed, and he almost fell down. Dongling reached out to pull him back, but Hinanchi seemed to have suddenly exploded. He raised his fist and punched Hidongling in the face. This punch was very heavy. He was filled with despair. Hidongling's nose started to bleed. The people at the side rushed forward, wanting to stop him. Hidongling said coldly, "Get lost. This is between us brothers." Hinanchi rushed over again, raising his fists and smashing them on his body. Hidongling did not resist and allowed him to beat him. Hinanchi quickly beat the crap out of him. Hinanchi suddenly screamed at the top of his lungs, "Fight back! Why aren't you fighting back, you bastard?" Hidongling spat out a mouthful of blood and said expressionlessly, "It's fine if you beat me to death. I originally thought that there was no meaning in living, so I can chase after her if I die." Hinanchi suddenly kicked him fiercely and kicked him out. Hidongling fell on the side of the mound. Below him was the pit where the coffin was placed. His face was covered in blood as he looked at the urn in the middle of the unclosed coffin. His eyes were a little sore. Hidongling stood up in a daze. Hinanchi rushed over again. He grabbed his collar fiercely and pushed him to the ground again. "It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, Wei Wei would not have begged Ninth Master." At that time, Hidongling should not have told Wei Wei Bai about him being kidnapped. What's more, he shouldn't have said that killing Ninth Master would save him. Hinanchi squatted down and raised his fist. Hidongling closed his eyes and did not dodge, letting him vent his anger. But that fist didn't fall. At https://www.sashu.com/read the full article at https://www.sashu.com read the full article at https://m/sashu.com button below to record this reading record. Chapter 639. He opened his eyes and saw Hinanchi's face full of tears. He gritted his teeth and looked at him in despair. "I'd rather die then, brother." Instead of letting Wei Wei Bai go to Jiuyi just to save him. Hinanchi's voice was almost crying as he shouted, "I'd rather die. I'd really rather die. You can't protect her no matter what." Hidongling stared at him blankly. Hinanchi laughed coldly, looking extremely miserable. "You married her, but didn't protect her. You said you wanted to remarry, but you still couldn't protect her." Hinanchi said coldly, "You're really a useless, blind old man." Hidongling didn't say anything. His eyes were heavy, and there was an indescribable gloominess. He used some strength to stand up. Just as he steadied himself, he threw out a punch. Hinanchi wasn't prepared and was hit hard. Hidongling didn't stop and continued to throw punches. "She's your sister-in-law. You're a little bastard who covets your sister-in-law. I'm standing here and letting you hit me because you're my younger brother, not because I want you to continue coveting her." Hinanchi looked at him fiercely. There was madness in his eyes. It made people shudder just by looking at it. He chuckled and suddenly raised his leg to kick him. Hidongling blocked his movement with both hands. Hinanchi didn't care and continued to kick. "Covet? You're the one with bad intentions. You want to steal your younger brother's woman." Hidongling laughed in anger. "She's your woman?" Hinanchi kicked him in the stomach. Hidongling punched him in the face. The two of them were like beasts at the end of the road, fighting and beating each other. The two brothers couldn't wait to kill each other at the funeral, or let each other kill themselves so that they wouldn't have to face the fact that she was dead. Hinanchi would never forget it. That day, after he was rescued, when he heard her say that she liked him, he was overjoyed. But when his brother's voice came from the other side of the phone, his world had collapsed. He said, "Wei Wei left. She left." It was a simple sentence. He had taken away the person he loved the most in his life. Hinanchi's face was covered in blood. Finally, he kicked Hidongling to the ground. Hidongling struggled to stand up again and again before finally collapsing onto the ground. Hinanchi didn't even look at him. He held his breath, walked to the side of the coffin, and stepped into the pit. Then he stretched out his hands and hugged the urn in a daze. He didn't say anything and just maintained his hugging position. His eyes were dead silent. If he could, he would rather be buried here and die with her. Hinanchi found that he didn't even have the strength to cry. He could only breathe with difficulty. His whole world was filled with suffocating pain. "Wei Wei, you saved me, but I'm living so hard. He finally said softly, feeling wronged. I'm so sad. Hinachi held her for a few hours. That extremely sorrowful appearance made people feel chilled to the bone. In the end, he finally put the urn back and then struggled to climb up the pit. As the soil buried the coffin, this funeral was finally completed. Hinachi completely matured after Wei Wei Bai's death. He was silent and wrote a lot of songs. They were all love songs about sweet love. On the stage, he was always the most dazzling star. Every song was the most classic of all the songs of that year. He had more and more fans, but outside of the stage, he became more and more closed off and private. ///// Chapter 640. He became a superstar. His songs eventually became popular overseas. Those international award winners who had rejected him also threw him an olive branch, hoping that he would attend the award ceremony. Hinachi did not reject them. After he went, he won the important awards very smoothly. Just like that, 10 years passed by in a hectic manner. Hinachi also became the most dazzling and brilliant star of this era. Everyone liked him and admired him. His fans were all over the world. His talent was obvious to the world. Hinachi held a global concert tour. Stop by stop, he sang the song he wrote for Bai Weiwei. Sweet lyrics, beautiful and warm songs. But for some reason, it made people cry. After the concert, he called He Dongling. He Dongling had become the richest businessman all these years, but he had always been single. He Dongling received his call, but the two of them did not speak at the same time. All these years, the two brothers seemed to have done it on purpose. They almost did not have any contact. From the beginning, they fought when they met. Later on, it was almost to the point where they ignored each other. He Dongling finally could not stand the silent atmosphere. He said, "What's the matter?" All these years, his influence gradually expanded, and he also escorted Hinachi's path to stardom. Hinachi also took on a few commercials for his company in the later years. He never took on commercials. It directly pushed his company's popularity to the world. Hinachi's eyes were indifferent, and his tone was unusually calm. "No, I just want to call you brother." He Dongling. Hinachi said again, "Wei Wei wants me to return to the stage and become the most dazzling star. Did I do it?" He Dongling heard the name Wei Wei, and his pupils shrank. Every time he thought of her for many years, that painful feeling still existed. He took a few deep breaths and said, "You did it, Nanshi, so don't force yourself to death." Hinachi had never stopped working all these years. He was practically writing songs with his life. When he was quiet, he was like a walking corpse. When he was writing a song, he poured all his soul into it. He Dongling sometimes felt that after Wei Wei Bai left, there was no need for him to worry. Hinachi was just a songwriting and singing machine. His happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy were all gone with that woman. "That's good. I fulfilled Wei Wei's wish." Hinachi chuckled. "Brother, goodbye." He Dongling looked at the phone strangely. This call came out of nowhere. Was he just calling to ask him this question? He Dongling put down the phone tiredly. He looked into the room and saw a 2-meter-tall doryman lying on the bed. Although it had been well maintained, however, he could still tell that this doryman was quite old. He Dongling walked up to the blue fatty and opened the zipper on the back, revealing a ring box that had lost its luster. Back then, when he gave her the blue fatty, the ring was hidden in the blue fatty. She accepted it, so she agreed to get married again. What a despicable way of proposing. He Dongling laughed at himself. His dark eyes were filled with tears of reminiscence. Sure enough, his idea was right. After Wei Wei Bai left, he would never meet a second her. He Dongling covered his eyes. "Falling in love with you is the worst deal I've ever made, but I am willing to do it." Hinachi put down the phone. He took out the key from under the doormat. Chapter 641. Almost no one came to this house anymore. These years, He Dongling was busy with work and flew all over the world. And Hinachi almost never came back. He tried his best to shine on the stage. His parents were also used to going abroad, so they simply emigrated. Hinachi opened the door and looked at the familiar furnishings. Every once in a while, someone from the housekeeping center would come to clean, so it was still very clean, Hinanchi walked in and stood there in a daze for a long time. But he realized that the most familiar figure did not rush out. She called him Nanchi. Hinanchi silently put down the luggage in his hand and squatted down silently. Weiwei, I've always put the key under the doormat. I was worried that when you came back, you wouldn't be able to enter without the key. As Hinanchi spoke, his voice was choked with sobs. But you don't seem to have come back. Hinanchi squatted for a while and stood up again. He went to the music room, turned on the piano, and started to play. He still remembered that day. Her ethereal voice directly pulled him into a fantasy and beautiful world. He had never heard such a beautiful voice. If she was still here, he would write songs for her to sing. Maybe you'll be more popular than me, and you'll also become a super diva. Everyone will be your fan, and you'll be the brightest star. Hinanchi finished playing the piano and started to talk to himself. But people are unfair. You're clearly better than anyone else, but the one who succeeds is someone else. Hinanchi stood up and went to the bathroom. He turned on the water and filled the bathtub with water. He changed into new clothes, casual and loose clothes with a hooded jacket. After he matured, he didn't dress like this for many years, because this kind of dressing always had the temperament of a teenager. Hinanchi touched the temperature of the water with his hand. I was afraid that you wouldn't recognize me, so I'm wearing the same clothes that I picked you up at the bar that day. The temperature of the water was just right. Hinanchi lay down quietly. Then, he reached for the knife beside him and cut his wrist without hesitation. The wound was terrifyingly deep. If it wasn't for the hand bone blocking the blade, he could cut off his own hand. Blood gushed out. The water in the bathtub was dyed red. Hinanchi lay in the water and quietly closed his eyes. He had already become the most dazzling star. He had fulfilled her wish, so she could finally rest. Hinanchi had been dead since the day Weiwei Bai died. The only one left in this world was Hinanchi, who lived the dream of Weiwei Bai. Now that his wish had come true, he could finally close his eyes. It was time to have a good sleep. In her dreams, she smiled and called out softly, Nanchi. Hinanchi smiled. Hey, Weiwei. How nice. How nice. How nice. Yi Yuxuan's lips trembled. The pain made him grit his teeth and groan. It was too painful. This kind of pain was much crazier than any of his previous experiences in the dream. Many fragments broke out of the dream and pierced into his body. The sad and crazy emotions in the dream were almost unbearable. He couldn't open his eyes and move his body. His muscles seemed to be torn apart inch by inch, and his bones began to shatter. The pain of losing his love again and again. It was all squeezed into one body. Yi Yuxuan couldn't breathe and endured it, but he didn't know how long he could hold on. He opened his mouth and called out silently, Weiwei Bai, Weiwei Bai, Weiwei Bai. Every dream was about her, and every time, he couldn't keep her. And read the at https://www.sashu.com/ and read at https://www.sashu. And read at https://www.sashu.com and read at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 642. His body slowly calmed down. Give up on this pain of reincarnation. He risked his life to reincarnate, but he still couldn't catch her. It would only leave him with pain. This thought seemed to have been given to him by the person in his dream. Yi Yuxuan knew that his condition was not right. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't move, he might not be able to take it and kill himself with his own hands like the man in his dream. When the system saw Yi Yuxuan in this state, it immediately opened the data. Damn you, the isolation of the dream world is not working. After transmigrating too many times, Yi Yuxuan finally couldn't take it anymore. The system was so nervous that its scalp was numb. Yi Yuxuan was done for, and Weiwei Bai was going to die with him. Weiwei Bai was confused and said to the system, "What's wrong with him? I'll go call the doctor." Yi Yuxuan looked like he had some kind of acute illness that caused him to be in so much pain. The system shouted, "Don't go." Weiwei Bai stopped in her tracks, confusion flashing through her eyes. The system was too agitated and revealed the anxiety and worry in its voice. Wei Wei Bai asked, "What's wrong?" The system immediately put away the emotions in its voice. Yi Yuxuan's current state doesn't mean that he has a relapse. Even if the doctor came, it would be useless. Yi Yuxuan's current state showed that he had been abused too much. Not to mention that his mind couldn't take it. His body was in so much pain that it couldn't take it. A person's emotions would affect their body. And it was obvious that Yi Yuxuan's mind couldn't take the pain of losing Wei Wei Bai again and again. That was why it was affecting his body. Wei Wei Bai's tone was extremely calm. Then what's wrong with him? The confusion in her heart grew deeper and deeper, but she didn't show it. Instead, she naturally wanted to get the system to speak. The system went along with her natural question and was about to tell the truth when its brain suddenly came to a halt. The words that were about to come out of his mouth were forcefully changed into, "His HP was taken away by you. That's why his body became like this. Can't you see that his aura is so weak that he can't even take away your HP when you're beside him?" Wei Wei Bai said doubtfully. "Is that really the case?" The system immediately swore, "It's true. It's really like that. That's why the doctors couldn't find out why he was in so much pain. It's because of his life points." Wei Wei Bai, didn't you say that his HP was terrifyingly high? How could there be a problem? The system remained silent for a while before saying, "There is something wrong with him." Wei Wei Bai, why do I feel like this scumbag is hiding something from me? System, why do I feel like this scumbag host saw through something? The silence between the two housemates was broken by Yi Yuxuan's moans. His fingers tightly gripped the bed, the veins on the back of his hand popping out. His handsome and cold face was slightly distorted. His eyes were half open, but they had lost focus. Wei Wei Bai's heart was tugged at by his miserable appearance. She quickly rushed to Yi Yuxuan's bedside and reached out to touch his face. Cold, hot, these two feelings were actually present on his skin. If this continued, it would be strange if he didn't become a cripple. Wei Wei Bai's face turned ugly. She didn't want anything to happen to him at all. "Yi Yuxuan, wake up. I'll call the doctor for you." She couldn't care less about the system's words. Even if she gave him a painkiller or something, he wouldn't be in so much pain. The system was just about to open its mouth to stop her. Yi Yuxuan's slender fingers suddenly grabbed onto its hand. He opened his eyes, and a flash of fear passed through them. "Don't go. / The Chapter 643. Wei Wei Bai's hand hurt from his grip, but she couldn't bear to pull it back. She couldn't help but say softly, "I'll go find a doctor." "Okay." Yi Yuxuan tried hard to suppress the pain in his body. His breathing was trembling, and his eyes were watery with pleading. "Don't go, stay with me." He had lost her too many times, and despair filled his entire body. Wei Wei Bai felt that Yi Yuxuan was really poisoned. His personality had changed too much in this period of time. She started to suspect that Yi Yuxuan had been transmigrated. The system saw that Yi Yuxuan's body data had been dropping crazily. It watched in fear. This couldn't go on. If the data continued to drop, Yi Yuxuan wouldn't be able to take it and die. It didn't expect that the accumulated feelings from so many planes would force him to this point. The system thought of the device that it gave Wei Wei Bai to block feelings. That was given by the main system, and each host could only have one. Once the identity was bound, it could only block one person. It directly wrote Wei Wei Bai's name, so even if it wanted to block Yi Yuxuan's feelings, there were no conditions. This thing couldn't be bought with life points. The system felt that its brain was about to be tied up, and it finally made a risky decision. Wei Wei, climb onto his body. Wei Wei Bai's hand was about to be broken by Yi Yuxuan's grip when she heard the system's strange request. "What am I doing? You can't be fishing for life points at this time, right? Yi Yuxuan is already like this. It's not nice of me to take the chance to fish for life points." Wei Wei Bai saw his miserable state and thought that it was caused by her fishing for life points. So when she lost the emotional shield, those feelings of empathy came out. Pity, gratitude, and a trace of undetectable heartache. The system said, "No, I want him to calm down, so I need you to give him a pacifier." Wei Wei Bai frowned and looked down. She discovered that Yi Yuxuan had already lost his consciousness. His eyes were half closed, but they were cloudy. His black hair was drenched in sweat and covered half of his face. Only his delicate chin and thin lips were exposed, but his hands still held on to her tightly. It was as if he was afraid that she would run away. Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to listen to the system. She climbed onto the bed and stayed close to Yi Yuxuan. The system's tone became anxious. No, just climb on his body and sit on it. Yerba will sit on his thighs. Wei Wei Bai. In the end, she compromised because Yi Yuxuan really wanted to break her hand. She grimaced in pain and crawled between his legs to straddle him. And then, the system hurriedly said, "Then call his name." Wei Wei Bai asked Yi Yuxuan. The system said, "Be more intimate." Wei Wei Bai said, "Baby." System, "Treasure your sister. You're still being naughty, aren't you?" Wei Wei Bai corrected him, "Yuxuan." The system heaved a sigh of relief. "All right, just call him that and kiss him." Wei Wei Bai. The system saw that the data was about to reach its lowest point. It shouted anxiously, "Kiss, kiss." Bai Weiwei felt that her family system was poisoned. It must be poison BA. Her lips twitched as she lowered her head and kissed him. His lips were cool and carried a fresh scent, which was not annoying at all. Wei Wei Bai knew that Yi Yuxuan was a bit of a clean freak and had always been clean. If it wasn't for chasing her, he might not even sweat during the dog days of summer. The slash to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 644. Such a man exuded a clean aura and had a clean temperament from head to toe. The kiss lasted less than 3 seconds. The system said, "It's done." The data went up a little. As expected, it was Wei Wei Bai's touch. It could wake Yi Yuxuan up. Wei Wei Bai left his lips without feeling disgusted at all. She felt that it might be because Yi Yuxuan was too clean. What happened to him? Tongzi. The system was so guilty that it was expressionless. Its voice was calm. Because of the loss of life points, it disturbed the aura of his body, causing severe pain. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I didn't expect it to cause such an effect. No matter what, he was her savior. Bai Weiwei's heart flashed with guilt. The system said, "Your aura is similar to his, so you can rub against him, hug him, kiss him, or even say that you love him. Just make his aura normal." In the end, it just wanted her to seduce him. Yi Yuxuan's heart was like dead ashes. Too many worlds of despair were intertwined together. He could barely bear it. He could only use Wei Wei Bai's touch to make him return to reality and not immerse himself in the tragic past. Wei Wei Bai looked at her bruised hand. She didn't have time to doubt the system's words. She had to save her hand first. She looked down at him and stretched out her other hand, gently stroking his wrinkled eyebrows. "Yuxuan, I'm Wei Wei. Can you hear me?" Her voice was soft like the spring water in March. It was so pleasant that it made people's ears itch. Wei Wei Bai's expression was affectionate. She gently touched his face. "Is it very painful?" "It's not painful anymore. I'll touch it and the pain will fly away." Her words were like coaxing a child, but her actions were like she was deeply in love with him. Yi Yuxuan's pained expression finally relaxed. He had not regained his senses yet. However, he was already able to speak. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Aren't you leaving?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment before she smiled and said, "You're here. Where can I go?" "No matter where I go, I still have to return to your side." This was the truth. No matter how many times he had to complete the mission, when he finally returned to reality, his HP was her lifesaver. The pain in Yi Yuxuan's brows was slowly smoothed out. However, the intense pain in his body was still there, causing his muscles to tremble. However, his expression was abnormally calm. If she hadn't sat on him, she wouldn't have noticed that he was still enduring the pain. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips. "Tongzi, are you sure that he will return to normal if I flirt with him?" No matter how he looked at it, it looked like an acute illness. He was afraid that the system would misdiagnose and delay the best time for emergency treatment. The system said, "Not necessarily. I just want to buy some time." To increase the data, it took out the fate roulette and said to Wei Wei Bai, "You take off his clothes?" Wei Wei Bai was used to cooperating with the system. She directly tore off Yi Yuxuan's collar with one hand. The buttons burst out, and several of them rolled to the bottom of the bed. His white shirt was open, revealing his fair chest with perfect muscle lines. He closed his eyes and looked a little haggard. However, he was still so handsome that there was no blind spot to be found. Wei Wei Bai held her breath, although there were so many men in the mission. However, once she returned to reality, those vivid memories began to blur. // Chapter 646. You can search Transmigration System. Male God, come to Sashu. Calm in Baidu. To find the Wei Wei Bai's body slowly approached Yi Yuxuan. In the end, her entire body was lying on his chest. Her long hair was scattered all over his body. Her expression was peaceful. Her eyes were calm and indifferent. Yi Yuxuan, I'm sleepy. I just want to sleep, so you don't have to stay up all night just to treat me. After she finished speaking, her eyes slowly closed. Yi Yuxuan's heartbeat also sped up a lot. He reached out his hands and gently hugged her, letting her lie on top of him. The sun shone in from outside the window. The two of them peacefully leaned against each other. It was very beautiful. Wei Wei Bai had a headache and wanted to open her eyes. The system's voice reminded her. This mission is to obtain Wake's love. Target, Wake. Completion, 0. Time, 5 months. Wake, why does this name sound like a foreigner? Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -30. -30, Wei Wei Bai felt that this was very challenging. Then she finally saw where she was. A huge white square-like room. In the middle of the room was a huge pool. The pool was filled with red water. The water was tumbling. Several corpses wearing white robes were floating on the water. Wei Wei Bai sat by the pool, holding a form book in her hand. A man's scream finally came from the pool. Then red blood gushed out and was diluted by the pool water. It was like hell on earth. Wei Wei Bai's face was a bit pale. Memory? Slag stem. This scene was a bit heavy. A corpse floated out again. No, it was a very heavy taste. Host, please receive the memory. Wei Wei Bai's mind was filled with a bunch of information. Then she finally knew why the target's name sounded like a foreigner. This wasn't actually a name. It was just a code name. A code name for a test subject. Wei Wei Bai's original body this time was a top student. It was the kind of person who had a photographic memory at 3 years old, skipped middle school at 7, and went to the best university at 11. At 15, she was a research monk who studied super profound things. He had waited until now for 20 years. He was already a world-class expert who specialized in genetic modification. A straight-A student was too awesome. As a transmigrator, she had to think hard just to look at her data. What exactly were these research terms? Although Wei Wei Bai was also a straight-A student, her focus was on business. When it came to scientific matters like this, it wasn't something that could only be done with intelligence. She had to be a genius. Wei Wei Bai admitted that she was not a genius. Of course, when it came to flirting, she was indeed a genius. The host cooperated with a top laboratory on a secret project. This project was about mermaids. There were mermaids in this plane. There were quite a few of them, and they were very ferocious. They ate shark meat and gnawed on whale bones. Their IQ was also high, and the construction of underwater cities was similar to that of humans. Although they were not as good as humans who could shoot rockets into the sky, the various racial talents of the merfolk were not comparable to humans. The merfolk regarded the ocean as their own territory and did not allow humans to mess around on it. They were not allowed to dump all the dirty water and garbage into the sea. Humans had fought several naval battles with the merfolk and lost all of them. In the sea, human nuclear submarines and warships were not good enough. They were easily dealt with by the merfolk and a bunch of underwater creatures. The ocean was too big. Humans couldn't blow up the entire ocean. So, after a while, the merfolk and humans had a feud, and it was a national feud. Chapter 647. Humans tried everything to get rid of the mermaids. There were so many resources in the sea, but they were all taken by the mermaids. This was almost unbearable for humans. So humans secretly started a plan called King's Destruction. The difference between the mermaids and humans was that they had a strict hierarchy. The lower mermaids would obey the orders of the upper mermaids. One of the mermaids, the pure-blooded king of the mermaids, had the natural right to command. Even if he gave the order, all the mermaids would obey unconditionally. This was their genetic instinct they could not resist. The true pure-blooded king had gone extinct. Humans stole the body of the last pure-blooded king and started cloning. The cloning failed too many times. Then they started again, genetic modification and fusion. Finally, in the hands of Wei Wei Bai, this pure-blooded king mermaid was born. The mermaid hatched from the egg. In just 3 years, it had matured. This mermaid was called Vic. Humans' plan to brainwash him into a mermaid that would listen to humans. Then they would let him return to the sea and order all the mermaids to surrender. The idea was good, but no one would have thought that Vic's brain inherited the memories of his ancestors from the deep sea, including his hatred for humans. And mermaids could control people's hearts. When Wei Wei Bai transmigrated, everyone on duty in the laboratory was killed. Lured by the mermaid's song, they jumped into the water and became the mermaid's prey. Wei Wei Bai sat by the pool, looking at the pool full of blood, suddenly quiet. This terrifying atmosphere. Wei Wei Bai could not help but say, "Didn't you say the song would lure them? Why didn't I hear it?" The system said, "I blocked it for you. You were lured by the song just now. After you transmigrated, I blocked it for you so you wouldn't jump into the water and be killed by the male lead." Wei Wei Bai said, "Then where is he now?" The water in this large pool was extremely frightening. The system said, "Beside your feet." Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Looking down, a pair of eyes appeared in the red blood water. Then, a crashing sound was heard. A figure broke out of the water. Cold blood splashed onto Wei Wei Bai's body. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but take a few steps back. Her legs were very weak. When she transmigrated, this body was already weak. She looked up. He saw Vic. His robust upper body had a jade-like luster. His long golden hair, white skin, and blue eyes were all covered with water vapor. Where the ears were, there were beautiful feathered fins with a faint blue luster. He seemed to be a little curious. His blue eyes carried a sense of immaturity and naivety. He opened his mouth. Wei Wei Bai asked, "What did he say?" He couldn't hear it at all. The system removed the sound barrier. Vic's lower body was in the water, and his upper body was above the water. On his handsome face, his facial features were well-defined, and his eyes were deep, giving him a kind of sharp beauty. Wei Wei Bai heard him say something else. He couldn't understand it at all. The system said, "Mermaid language." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Can you translate it?" The system said, "No." Wei Wei Bai. Vic tilted his head curiously. He smiled coldly, and the murderous look in his eyes finally appeared. He stretched out his slender, white, and beautiful fingers. His sharp nails suddenly stretched out, full of terrifying attack power. Wei Wei Bai's scalp exploded, and she rolled and crawled away. The at https://www.sasho.com/ the full text at https://www.sasho.com/download text at https://www.sasho.com the at https://m/sasho.com/. Chapter 648. Wake moved his body, the water rolled, and he jumped directly to the top of the pool. A strong and beautiful fishtail appeared in front of Bai Wei Wei, streaking across the water. The waist of the fishtail was light gold, and the lower it was, the closer it was to blue. She had a beautiful fishtail, but she casually brushed aside the corpses in the water. The flesh of the corpse was immediately cut open by the spikes of the fishtail, revealing the bones. He lay on the top of the pool, using his strong hands to support the ground. His long blonde hair fell to the ground, his beautiful eyes staring at Wei Wei Bai. It was full of malice towards the prey. Bai Wei Wei felt that she shouldn't think about the strategy for now. Escaping was the most important thing. Flirting with men, she could do it. Flirting with a fish, how? Flirting with ghosts was better than flirting with fish. Wei Wei Bai quickly got up and was about to run. System, be careful. Wei Wei Bai instinctively rolled down, and a fierce attack slashed the ground with a creak. A deep crack appeared on the smooth ground. Wei Wei Bai looked at the ground, stunned. Is this a mermaid? This is a cutting machine. The system said, the mermaids here are very powerful. One of them can easily kill a shark, and the male lead is a mermaid king. He can easily kill an entire group of sharks. Wei Wei Bai, my heart is cold. Wake lay on the ground. His speed was terrifying, and he was already close to Wei Wei Bai. His beautiful and delicate eyes narrowed, and his fingernails shone with a blue luster, with a murderous aura. Wei Wei Bai quickly got up and ran. In the original owner's memory, there was an emergency button. It was near the door, but before she could run 2 steps, her body was pounced on by the mermaid behind her. She was overwhelmed at once. Wei Wei Bai looked up and saw Wake smile. His smile was so beautiful it could seduce people. Wei Wei Bai only saw the murderous intent of his prey. He raised his hand, and his nails were about to penetrate her body. Suddenly, his body stiffened and his eyes widened as he stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She didn't dare to move, but she bent her knee and pressed it against his abdomen. That was the mermaid's thing. It was hidden in the reproductive cavity and was not usually exposed. It would only be taken out at critical moments. Wake didn't dare to move. She did not dare to move. However, Wei Wei Bai's body was weak and not as strong as the mermaid's. She could maintain an action for a long time. As time passed, she couldn't help but shift her knees. Wake's blue pupils constricted, his feathery ear fins also moved, and a comfortable expression appeared on his face. Wei Wei Bai. Then Wei Wei Bai tried to move again. Wake couldn't help but narrow his eyes, pursed his lips, and tensed up his back. Fuck, you shameless and lewd mermaid. If his knees were already like this, wouldn't his hands be flying into the sky? Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but complain to the system. No, this isn't the pure mermaid in my impression. System. Who is the mermaid in your impression? Wei Wei Bai, the little mermaid in Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale. System. This mermaid's genes are fused with some ancient shark's genes. Sharks are bloodthirsty and lustful. Wei Wei Bai's expression was ugly. She quietly lowered her knees and wanted to slip away. However, in the next second, the originally obedient mermaid's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He looked at Wei Wei Bai gloomily. His fingers grabbed her knees and put them back to that indescribable place under his abdomen. Wei Wei Bai. This mermaid doesn't even care about his face anymore. Chapter 649. In broad daylight, in front of so many people, what was the difference between a naked request for sex and a beast? Mermaids seem to be beasts too. Looking at Vic's extremely handsome face, she revealed a weak expression. If it weren't for his hand, he would have forced her knees up. She thought that he was just a big baby who didn't know any better. Vic's ice blue eyes were as clear as the calm sea. However, his sharp, gleaming nails and his terrifyingly strong body allowed him to easily catch up with a human's movement on land. It made Wei Wei Bai feel like she was facing a terrifying large carnivore. She didn't dare to act rashly, and the memory of the original owner couldn't help her. Because Vic lived in the culture tank for 3 years. From a small fish, he became such a big one. He was only officially released from the culture tank a month ago. After he was released, because he hadn't been brainwashed yet, everyone tried not to communicate with him. Today was the day of brainwashing. Vic used his singing to attract all the researchers. Then he slaughtered them. When Wei Wei Bai saw these memories, her mouth and tongue were bitter. In the face of a fish that hated humans, she couldn't trick him. Vic's body moved, as if he felt that if she didn't move, she would be useless, so he wanted to kill her. Wei Wei Bai was excited. Her knees trembled. Vic's body tensed up, his brows furrowed tightly, and his tail hit the ground with a bang. Then he gently exhaled. His ethereal voice was full of beautiful sighs. Wei Wei Bai, what's wrong? The system was expressionless. Premature ejaculation. Wei Wei Bai? The system. This is the first time I've seen a mermaid that can produce pleasure without exposure. Wei Wei Bai wanted to pretend that she didn't understand the system's words. Exposure and whatnot. This plane was so dirty and bloody that they were all gathered together. Bai Weiwei felt that her whole person was not good. Vic tilted his head curiously. Under his long blonde hair, his beautiful face was a little confused. Then he casually stuck out the tip of his tongue and licked his fingers. Then he reached out and plunged it into Wei Wei Bai's chest. It was as if he wanted to get rid of Wei Wei Bai after he was done with her. Before Wei Wei Bai could struggle, a researcher rushed in from the door. Wei Wei Bai recognized that this researcher liked to be late. That was why he managed to avoid a calamity. When he saw the bloody scene, he screamed and immediately reached for the emergency button on the door. There were 3 buttons. The first one was to attack the mermaid. A sharp anger flashed in Wake's eyes. His fingers tightened, and the beautiful lines of the bones on the back of his hand could be seen. He immediately let go of Wei Wei Bai. His fishtail swayed, his fingers on the ground, and his neck raised. His entire body was full of attack power, and his explosive power was terrifying. In less than 3 seconds, he suddenly appeared in front of the researcher. The sharp nails easily cut through his neck. Blood gushed out. However, the first button had already been pressed. The white laser quickly appeared, and Vic was hit. The laser cut through his body, and he let out a tragic cry. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She immediately rushed over, pressed the first button, and turned off the laser. She didn't have time to look at others. She rushed directly to him. The wound on his tail was too big, and the blood kept gushing out. If this continued, the target of this strategy would be finished. Wei Wei Bai immediately took off her coat and quickly bandaged him. Collect below to record this reading record. Chapter 650. Then a small cart was pushed out of the laboratory. Putting him in the cart, he opened his eyes weakly, his golden eyelashes trembling slightly, his eyes full of puzzlement. Why did she save him? Wei Wei Bai completely received the memory in her mind. She knew that the monitoring equipment in the laboratory was turned off. The mermaid's song encouraged the researchers to turn it off. So no one knew what happened in the laboratory. And Wei Wei Bai was not on duty today, so Wei Wei Bai's name was not on the record. The rest of the researchers on duty today were all dead. Wei Wei Bai decided to send him somewhere else, at least not to the laboratory. Because a mermaid who kills people is a failed research product. It can't survive. In addition, humans also hate mermaids, so Wake will definitely die if he stays here. A mermaid king is also useless. He can call the wind and summon the rain in the sea. Here, he can only be trampled on, so if she sends him out now, others will just think that the mermaid killed people and ran away. She won't remember it. Wei Wei Bai went through the plan in her mind and found it feasible. She immediately rushed out of the laboratory. Then she dragged him in her car with great effort. Blood soaked his clothes, and blood began to drip on the car seat. Wei Wei Bai's face immediately changed, and she dragged out the medicine box from the side. In the medicine box, there was a needle to stop the bleeding. Wei Wei Bai pressed his tail and looked up, her face full of worry. "Don't be afraid. I'll stop the bleeding for you. Don't move, Wake." Wake didn't attack Wei Wei Bai because he was weak. He looked at her with doubt, as if he couldn't understand why she saved him. In Wake's mind, the memories of those ancestors were all scenes of humans brutally and crazily slaughtering them. He has just been reborn, and the memory inheritance has not been completed yet. But he knows what he needs to know. For example, if he failed to escape this time, he will be disposed of. Just like the countless previous failures, he will be directly executed. Wei Wei Bai stuck the needle into his tail and annotated the medicine. Then, she reached out and unbuttoned her clothes, revealing her injured flesh. Due to the effect of the medicine, the blood began to coagulate. As Wei Wei Bai watched, tears suddenly fell from her eyes. "Wake, why are you so stupid? How can you suddenly attack a human? You will die." Although Vic couldn't speak human language, he could understand. When he heard this, a hint of murderous intent appeared in his icy blue eyes. His fingers curled up in an attacking posture. Was she going to kill him? Wake's memory of Wei Wei Bai was when he opened his eyes. She was standing outside the culture tank, looking at him with a look of research. He didn't like that look. Although his memory was incomplete, his dignity as a king did not allow others to look at him with such impudent and rude eyes. However, Wei Wei Bai took out a bandage and tried her best to bandage him. She cried as she bandaged him. "I won't let you die. I will save you." Tears fell on his tail one by one. The warm tears made his cold tail feel numb and itchy. Wei Wei Bai looked up, her eyes filled with tears of sadness. She looked at Wake with a gaze filled with warmth and emotions. "I have watched you for 3 whole years. I was the one who raised you. You are the most important person to me." The most important person? Wake didn't understand her words. He looked at her blankly. Then his eyelashes trembled and slowly covered his icy blue eyes. The hemostatic agent and the anesthetic started to take effect. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.